but we are comrades, of course, on Socialism Saturday. Guys, welcome to Socialism Saturday. I hope you guys are all having a great weekend. Socialism Saturday is when we watch socialism. I want to hear. I have always been obsessed with the dystopian. For all basically, I mean, for as long as I can remember, I've wanted to read extreme things or macabre things or things that present these kind of like horrific versions of society, like 1984 and Brave New World and Fahrenheit 451 and those types of things. Well, guess what? We are privileged. We are privileged capitalists in that YouTube has provided us with a treasure trove of not fictional dystopia, but real live dystopia in the form of real live socialists. We aren't talking about AOC. We're not talking about Bernie Sanders. We're not talking about CNN socialists. On Socialism Saturday, we watch the real deal socialists, the farthest left of the far left. And what we have found is that when you watch Socialism Saturday, it is like a peek into the future state of the Democratic Party. This whole thing started as a complete accident where I happened to find out that there was a live socialism conference and I meta streamed their conference. They were live streaming their conference and I live streamed their live stream. And ever since then, it's been all downhill from there. Can you ask questions? You can always ask questions. I'm not sure I'm going to have the answer for you, but you are always welcome to ask questions. So what are we watching today? Well, we are going back to one of our favorite channels, Haymarket Books. Haymarket Books is actually the sponsor of the Socialism Conference, and they publish almost exclusively highly socialist material, and including, I mean, they have like all sorts of people on their channel, like Epermex Kendi is featured on the Haymarket Books YouTube channel. I wonder why that is. Kimberly Crenshaw has been featured on the Haymarket Books YouTube channel. And so they are a bastion of information and perspective on real and legitimate socialism. And so that's where we're going today. This is the question you want me to answer on Socialism Saturday. What is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is experience. That's my take on it anyway. The meaning of life is experience. A good experience, bad experience, but learning about different experiences. Incognito says, didn't mean sound like I was debating on Zoom. Sorry, just needed to vent, but thank you for clarification, even if we agree to disagree sometimes. I appreciate that, Incognito. Listen, no harm, no foul. We're allowed to disagree. What Incognito is talking about is we just had our bitchcraft call in my community, and well, I hear the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire has been tweeting some spicy things today. I understand that the point, if you don't know what they're tweeting, just don't look. It's fine. But I understand the point they're making with the tweets. I don't think they're making the point altogether perfectly. However, any complaints with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire Twitter account needs to be directed to them because I am not directly involved in the account and I am retired as the person that is explaining away the LPNH tweets. Just ask them. If you have questions about it, just ask them. They'll answer. But no, Incognito, you're good. You're good. Oh, we have a troll. We have a troll. Are you here for anything productive at all? Are you upset at 4,000 libertarians who didn't vote for me for governor? No, I'm not upset at all. The governor's race was purely a function of who was at the top of the ballot. I was not lucky enough to win that particular random draw, and that's the way it goes, man. You win some, you lose some. But the libertarian who did get the votes is not at all involved with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. She will never be involved with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. She holds absolutely no power in either the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire or the Libertarian National Party. And no amount of votes is actually going to change that particular outcome. So it made no difference to me. As I said repeatedly, many times on this channel, I didn't even actually care about the governor's race. I was much more focused on the Senate race. So thanks for stopping by, little troll. You're welcome to stay and try to learn something if you would like. But actually, you know what? Maybe this is a good time. We'll talk about what we're watching in a second. But because we already have a troll in the chat and they're still doing their trolly thing, we're going to talk about our chat rules. Oh, hang on. Let me make that a little bit bigger so you guys can actually see it. We're going to talk about our chat rules for a second. Troll, you want to pay attention to this. Will a libertarian ever win a governor's race? Will it be you? Probably not, and definitely not. I will never run for political office again, little troll, because your friends decided to dox my friends to run a smear campaign against me. So I'll never run for office again because I never want my friends to be hurt again, like your friends hurt my friends when they doxed my friends and smeared them all over the internet in an attempt to get to me. So it will absolutely not be me. I will never be doing that again. And you can consider this your last warning. So we have 2 rules in my chat. Number 1 is don't be a dick. And little troll, if you are questioning right now whether this rule applies to you, I promise you it does. You will be considered being a dick if you insult me. You will also be considered being a dick if you insult anyone that is in the chat, because I like to create a nice environment on my channel and I'm not going to put up with that shit. So don't be a dick. Number 2, no whining. If I tell you to stop doing something, stop doing it. No amount of debate is going to change my mind. And if you continue to whine and complain about my decisions on my channel, then I will just block you and you will be removed from the situation entirely. That's it. Those are our only 2 rules on my channel. Don't be a dick and no whining. And that's all how it goes. All right, let's go back to the presentation we're watching today. I'm pretty sure you were trolling. You know exactly what you were doing, and I know exactly what you were doing, and now I would like it to stop. And I don't believe you. And so you're gonna rein it back in. You are going to follow the rules of my channel. I'm not messing around. It's not worth the $5 a month, man. I'll tell you that right now. All right. Here is what we're watching tonight. I think that this is gonna be a really fascinating presentation. Oh, hang on. Ah! We'll begin the video when I say we begin the video, little troll, which you would know if you actually watch my channel. That's your last warning, dude. I'm not fucking around any longer. Sit back, relax, get yourself a drink, but you're not going to disrupt this chat any longer. All right, here's what we got going for today, guys. We are watching from Haymarket Books on political violence, fascist mobilization, and queer and trans self-defense. Check this out. And this is recent. This was 10 days ago. For most of the left, political violence is a forbidden topic. But at this moment, queer and trans people face the real threat of violence from a growing movement of armed fascists in America. How can we think about this? And what steps are necessary to defeat them? What do existing projects to keep us safe have to teach us? Okay, so guys, just so you are aware, this is the type of thing that will get you banned from my chat. And I gave you warnings, I gave you opportunities, and now you're gone. Goodbye. This is why we never believe people who say, I've I watch every video you do and I'm such a fan and I support your work and I'm a donor, but why are you doing these things that I don't like? They're almost, fun fact, they're almost always liars. Um, all right, so this is what we're watching tonight. This is gonna be about an hour and a half long, and I think it's gonna be amazing, and I'm really looking forward to that. But before we jump into our Socialism Saturday for tonight, just a couple things. Number 1, we have movie night tomorrow in my community. This is going to be in the supporter Discord. You can get access to the supporter Discord by either becoming a donor in my Patreon or on my locals. And the info is in the description below. You can go to activelyunwoke.com/support. That will give you links to my Patreon and on my locals. And you can join us for movie night in the supporter Discord. We just got done a month of movie nights. We watched a whole bunch of stuff. We watched 1984. We watched V for Vendetta. We watched Poltergeist. We watched Nightmare on Elm Street. We watched The Thing. We watched all sorts of great movies in the month of October. Moving into November, we've got Coraline. And this is in dedicate. John Morgan is hosting us, and it's going to be his birthday movie night. So happy birthday to John Morgan, who is a valued member of our community, not a troll in my chat trying to make my life difficult. And we're going to be doing that tomorrow at 8 p.m. I've never seen Coraline, so I have absolutely no idea what it's about. But I think we're going to really enjoy it. And we always have great discussion in movie night, which is really great. Need to watch Brazil. I'm fairly certain Brazil is on the list. Oh, John Morgan is here. Yay. Yeah, I think Brazil is on the list. I didn't like Brazil the last time I tried to watch it, which was so many years. It was like I think I tried to watch Brazil like in college or something, probably about 20 years ago. I didn't like it then, but maybe my perceptions on a lot of things have certainly changed now. Yes, an hour and a half video, which means we will be here for probably about 6.5 hours. Luckily, I have beer with me. Anyway, if you want to join us for movie night tomorrow, follow the link in the top of the chat. That will get you either into my locals. You can also join via Patreon, which will also get you into the Discord. And I will be sending out if you're not in the Discord yet, I will be sending out the link to supporters at some point tomorrow afternoon, probably. And then you can join us there. Leonardo says, huge fan. I'm in the military and I'm for free speech, and you're not able to say certain things when trans and other professional victims are in the room. Well, I will say this, guys. Like, I do. There is a difference between can and should, right? There's a difference between can and should. And what I will ask is that people in the chat be respectful. I don't wanna see any, like, overtly, like, antagonistic comments for people based on their gender identity or sexual orientation. You might say that sounds woke, but for me, there is for our purposes here, it doesn't serve us to insult people, okay? And you always also have to keep in mind that everything you say in the chat is public. So, someone can very easily take something off color that is said in the chat and use it against me and use it against my community and use it against you. And so I do ask that people be judicious about the comments they make, particularly when we're talking about trans people, because that is a very touchy subject for a lot of people. I'm not saying you can't have opinions. You're allowed to have whatever opinions you want. But insofar as this particular exercise, I'm going to ask people to put on their adult pants for the evening. Um, it's perfectly fine to criticize them for the content of their message. I just would really prefer not to see criticism from the point of view of how people look or anything like that, because I don't think it adds any value. But no, I definitely do understand that there are speech issues around this, and I'm not turning my head off to or turning my brain off to that. I just want to make clear my position. Let me clarify. I mean, when debating and discussing certain things, you should be able to openly debate. I agree with you. I 100% agree with you that we should be able to openly debate. I am also just asking, and I'm saying this, Leonardo, less for you than I am for, no, it's less about your specific chat. Okay, let me put my cards on the table. For the last couple days on Twitter, there have been an awful lot of people attacking a teenager for winning a beauty contest because that teenager doesn't look how they believe he should look or she should look, depending. I don't even know what what their pronouns are. I'll call them them. I don't want to misgender. And I find that sort of thing to be reprehensible, to be honest. I don't like seeing people attacked for how they look. I like seeing, like, if you have questions about the content of what they're saying, we'll do a lot of that tonight. But, you know, there are better things to do than that. So that might not be the point that you're making, and I'm respectful of that, and I do believe we should be able to debate all ideas. I am simply saying that I don't want to see any attacks on people for how they look because I don't think it's productive. That's all I'm asking. Janice says, right now, can and should due to opposite. Yeah, I mean, well, I think we always have to be mindful of how our how our language either furthers our goals or doesn't further our goals. And I understand that might be ironic coming from me because I am not one to censor my language all that often. But just keep in mind that if you say it, it can and will be used against you. That's all I'm saying. All right. So we're going to get into this, guys. Let's see. Do I have any other announcements? Oh, I do. Not there. There. Another thing we're doing in my community coming up is we are reading the Unabomber Manifesto, a nice uplifting book. And we're gonna have book club about it on December 10th. So this is also only available to supporters in my Patreon, my locals, things like that. So if you want to join us for book club, pick up a copy of Industrial Society and Its Future by Theodore Kaczynski, and you can join us for Unabomber Book Club coming up on December 3rd. We are not, I want to be extremely clear about this, conservatives, because I know it's coming from conservatives. We are not going to attack a teenager for how they look on this channel. Am I understood? If you do this, you will be breaking the first rule of the chat that I showed you less than 5 minutes ago. I want no uncertain terms about this. I'm not doing it. Okay? So you can have whatever opinions you want to have, but we are not going to be attacking teenagers for how they look on this channel. And that's the last time I'm going to say it. All right. I sometimes I feel like I'm just asking too much. I don't know how we got to this place. No, I do know how we got to this place. Sometimes I feel like I've asking too much for basic civility. Anyway, I want to pour a beer before we get started. If you're drinking something fun, please chat in what you're drinking. I'm going to go with Bommin' Still Poppin', kind of because I kind of think the can looks a little bit socialist, if I'm honest. But this is a Berliner Weiss with sea salt and raspberry, so I think it's also going to be very, very red. Let's see what this looks like. Yes. Oh, ah! The beer the beer fizzed. Ah! I had to make sure I didn't get it all on my white knitting. So I just got a thing full of fizz. But it's red, it's pink. Yeah, Spot, this is the one with real fruit in it. Oh, shit. Did I not make it clear that we are not going to be attacking people for how they look? Did I not make that clear? This is your last warning. You can either drop the topic or you can keep it up and you'll just be blocked from the chat. It's your choice entirely. It's like I have to say things 15 times with conservatives because they just don't fucking listen. All right, the beer is pouring. I gotta wait for a second for the fizz to go down, but we're gonna get this party started, guys, because I'm beating this dead horse long enough, and you guys want to watch socialism, and I do too. Yes, the beer tried to the beer tried to sabotage me. The beer doesn't want us to watch socialism tonight. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna say before we get started, if you have never watched socialism before, socialism, when you first start watching it, can be a little bit confusing. The reason that it's going to sound confusing to some of you is because they are very literally speaking a different language. Okay, you are now breaking the no whining rule of the chat. I have asked you to stop doing something. You have not stopped doing it. You are, in fact, doubling down on it. If you want to remain visible in my chat, you're going to cut this shit. If I ask you to stop doing something, you either stop or you're not going to be here much longer, dude. The choice is entirely yours. I don't understand why this is so difficult. I don't understand. So, when you're watching socialism for the first time, it is going to sound like it is a completely different language. And that's because they are speaking a different language. These people are insane. They are usually extremely academic. They are okay. I don't if an okay, if one more person talks about this beauty pageant and makes excuses for why they need to attack a teenager for how they look, you will be instantly blocked from the chat and I'm no longer fucking around. I have warned you. I have asked you nicely. I am not putting up with this shit. It is not going to happen on this channel. Does everyone understand? There are many things that you can criticize people for. But criticizing a teenager for how they look is not going to happen here. It is not going to happen. If you, okay, I would encourage the mods to block anyone who are ignoring this rule. Guys, this really isn't that hard. It's really not that hard. And if you are the type of person that is going to insult teenagers for how they look, you don't belong here. I do not have an unmoderated chat. I do not have an open chat. And I think it's a pretty minimal standard that we don't, as adults, insult teenagers for how they look. If you don't like it, you're welcome to continue, and we will just remove you entirely. Criticize the ideas. Don't criticize the person, especially when that person has not fully developed the logic reason function of their brain. Am I understood? We've already had to block like 3 people because they could not resist the urge to insult teenagers. My God. All right. No, they're not criticizing the judges. No, they are not. Stop fucking lying. All right. You guys want to get some stuff out of your system with ragging on a teenager in a local beauty pageant? Do you guys want to work out some feelings? Or should we actually start the video? What do people think? Yes, I am generally upset when I lay out clear and simple rules and people still can't abide by them. And I'll go ahead and sit here until people want to decide to. It's really up to them. If you tell me how to run my chat, you're not going to be here very long. I'll tell you that right now. Is everyone ready? Excellent. Moving forward, I am following Dragonwater's advice, and anyone who mentions the beauty pageant is just going to be summarily blocked. And if you have feelings about that, you can go and complain on Twitter. When we are watching socialism, it can sometimes be very confusing to understand what they are saying. I am often confused myself, and I've watched a lot of this stuff lately. So I will do my very best to try to explain it. However, Socialism Saturday is a participatory event. It is a participatory event. And so if you have thoughts about why they are saying certain things or the points they are making or how we should interpret things, then please feel free to chat it in. I will be watching the chat. I will absolutely be moderating the chat for anyone who wants to break my rules. And if you say something really intelligent, I'll display it on the screen and we can talk about it. I can't be expected to have all the good ideas myself. I can't be expected to know everything. I do rely on people in the chat to also help with Socialism Saturday. And when you offer some ideas and some perspectives, that means that you are going to help all of us. All right? Let's get this party started. Let me make sure I have it set up correctly because I've now been distracted by fucking nonsense per usual. Welcome to my life. All right, guys, mount that like button if you are ready for Socialism Saturday. Let's go. Yes, and it is not exactly, hang on. If they have sound problems, it's not my fault. They suck with technology.
Hello, everyone.
Oh God, it's this person again.
I'm O'Brien, and
we are deeply familiar with M.E. O'Brien. We have watched M.E. O'Brien like 3. I didn't realize M.E. O'Brien was in this. Who remembers where M.E. O'Brien is from? Who remembers where this person is from? You should. They were on the last Socialism Saturday. I know it was like 3 weeks ago. This is a person who believes that all children should be born via surrogacy and that we should abolish the family. So apparently this person also believes that the fascists are taking over. Yes, this person has been very recent. What a nice surprise. We get a reoccurring character. Yes, this person was from exactly, Vince, the abolish the family one.
very excited about the event here tonight. It's being
And my beer is
organized,
settled
hosted
down.
by
Cheers,
Haymarket, and
everyone.
supported by them, and organized and hosted by Pinko Magazine. I'll tell you a little bit about Pinko and some of our thinking for the event, and then I'll read the bios for our great speakers tonight, and then ask a series of questions of each speaker, and then sort of we will open it up and have a more open conversation in the panel. And at some point, people can put in your own questions on YouTube, and we will try to integrate those as the program goes on. So Pinko is a collective for thinking gay communism together. We published 2 print issues so far.
Pinko is a communist magazine. So this is not even, keep this in mind, we're not even talking socialist at this point. We're talking full-blown self-described communists. That's who we're watching tonight. Because they believe that the family unit is detrimental to the collective. They want everyone to belong to the state. That's why. This is a collectivist ideology.
Periodic zines and host irregular essays, translations, and archival material on our website, pinko.online. This is the second in an event series we're doing this fall, specifically on the current political attacks on queer and trans people. For most of the left, political violence is a forbidden topic. But at this moment, queer and trans people face the real threat of violence from a growing movement of armed fascists in America. How can we think about this, and what steps are necessary?
Let's keep in mind that they have not defined
what do existing projects
fascists
do to keep us safe, and what do they have to teach us? So that's our formulation of the event. The other members, editorial team at Pinko, were all played very instrumental and active roles in conceptualizing and organizing this event. I'll add a little bit about my own thinking in doing this to help get us started. Often the really valuable skills, experience, and organization around militant self-defense is pretty isolated to a relatively small group of revolutionaries in specific segments of working class life. I grew up in the 90s in Oregon when the neo-Nazi movement was very large, and there was a vibrant,
that large neo-Nazi movement in Oregon,
violent confrontations with Nazis. And there was always a political dynamic with whether they were completely isolated from the left.
Raspberry and sea salt, William. A Berliner Weiss.
Would not engage in self-defense in any meaningful way. So at different historical moments, broader self-defense was taken up by a broader segment of the working class as part of integrated mass movements. And we know some of the history of the Black Panthers and other periods in history when this has happened. In our planning for this event and talking about it, Melissa Giora-Grant, one of our panelists, told a story, sort of describing a shift on the ground of liberal activists.
I wonder if this is going to be like when we first started Socialism Saturday, we watched something that was labeled anti-fascist organizing, and we thought it was going to be like Antifa or something like that, but it turned out to just be a bunch of like communist journalists. But I do, oh no. Oh no, it's water. I thought I got beer on my shawl. And obviously that took priority. But I do wonder if this is actually going to be like, is this person talking about like actual Antifa? I bet you that it would not surprise this person specifically. It would not surprise me if they were like actual Antifa.
Activists or people who previously might really distance themselves from militants or revolutionaries or self-defense or riots or whatnot, suddenly finding themselves relying on anti-fascists, experienced anti-fascist activists to be able to attend an event or walk to their car when events were being targeted.
We just got our question answered
around attacking queerness and trans life. And so that dynamic of sort of this moment of self-defense being looked at, being considered, being taken seriously more broadly is one of the reasons that I was really excited about doing this event and
Bro,
trying to think about if we're in a moment right now.
You're on the edge of breaking the chat rules, and you've been on the edge of breaking the chat rules the entire time. If you want to insult me, you're not gonna be here very much longer. You're getting a timeout for right now. That's your last warning.
Now that self-defense could become salient for a much broader range of people. And if the skills of people on this panel and people that we're in touch with might be useful in trying to think about that. Okay, now I'll read the bios, and I'll read them in the order of who I'm going to ask questions of. So Melissa Gira Grant is a staff writer at the New Republic, the author of
God, the New Republic.
The Work of Sex Work, published by Verso, and an excellent book, I'll add, and the co-director of They Won't Call It Murder, executive produced by Field of Vision. She has reported on violence.
Oh, see, I told you they suck with technology. They just took all themselves off the screen.
Police killings in Columbus and the global movement for sex worker rights. She's currently at work on a new book, The Woman is Against the Law, Sex, Race, and the Limits of Justice in America, to be published by Little Brown and Company. LV is a communist living in Los Angeles. She organized the Bash Back Denver and the 2010 Bash Back Convergence, as well as a number of militant queer groups in Los Angeles.
Militant queer
Trans
groups.
Liberation LA, Trans Undocumented Rapid Response Network, or CHURN, and the 2014 Queer Apocalypse. She is a
this is the most left of the left. These are actual Antifa.
Practicing conflict mediator and developing an eco-defense video game.
An Antifa conflict mediator.
Sheila T is a huge nerd and trans feminine person and anarchist living in Philadelphia. She's been practicing an anarchist and queer struggles since around 2010. Max, they, them, is a community organizer in Sacramento, California. Their work usually revolves around the abolition of prisons and private property, but they have been an active organizer against platforms of far-right extremism.
Captions, thank you.
And Christo-fascism.
Captions are on.
For many years. So we're very excited to have these panelists, and thank you all for...
I'm sorry for people who like captions. There's nothing that's happening when I'm turning on the captions, so we'll have to manage. But I was like that... I'm trying to be respectful of people's pronouns. I'm not sure I would have guessed she for Sheila T. That's all I'm saying.
For being here tonight. So I wanted to open with a sort of broad overview and asking Melissa, could you give us an overall picture of nationally of the fascist upsurge and the attacks on anti-queer and anti-trans people?
Sure. Thank you so much also to Pinko and to Haymarket for doing this. These are the questions that have been on my mind all summer, all year. So this couldn't be better timed. I feel like I've spent the last year doing nothing but following these attacks. And there's way more than I could possibly summarize in the time that we have here. So I thought what I would do is sort of talk about the pattern and then talk about a couple of specific attacks that I think illustrate this pattern. So the pattern, as I've seen it, sort of honed over the last 2 years, we have individuals mobilizing across the US, often unaffiliated with any well-known far-right group, influenced by propaganda that's being shared by popular social media accounts. So this is not happening on like the fringes of the internet.
Who? They're going to say Jack Posobiec and Mike Cernovich.
That propaganda demonizes LGBTQ people as dangers to children. And then these individuals terrorize libraries, schools, hospitals, churches, other community spaces that are welcoming to queer and trans people.
So what she's talking about is Nicole Solis and the other people working against gender ideology. That's so Nicole Solis is a mom in Rhode Island that got sued by the teachers unions because she requested too much information from the school. Nicole also hosted an event not too long ago, actually like not long before this, at a library in Rhode Island that these type of people completely shut down her event. It was all about gender ideology in the schools, and these people showed up to shut down her event and make sure she couldn't host it. So when they say that they're targeting like they're targeting like libraries and stuff like that, what she means is There are people that are saying things that we don't like, that are hosting events where they're saying things that we don't like, and we need to prevent them from saying things that we don't like. So she's not even actually talking about like the really bad people. She's not even talking about the Proud Boys. She's talking about like moms that are hosting events at libraries.
And then they document the ensuing pushback and conflict as evidence that they themselves are victims under attack by some powerful lobby, which is a very classic fascist move, to position yourself as the victim in the violence that you've instigated, and to over exaggerate the power of the people that you're actually doing violence against. So I'm going to focus on how we're seeing these forms of mutually reinforcing
against
violence,
Gabs and her friends.
where
Exactly.
we see these fascist formations that are mostly in particular cities or sometimes networked across the country, and how that's connected with elected officials who are working at the local, state, and federal level, and how those different groups are reinforcing these messages and driving this violence in tandem. So here's two examples of what look like they could be disparate attacks that happened over the course of 3 months, but I think they show how all these attacks are linked, who coordinates them, and then who the boots on the ground are, as it were. So I'm going to start in Dallas this June. There's a group there called Protect Texas Kids. It's a pretty new group, and it's headed by a self-described Christian fascist whose name is Kelly Neidert. I might be pronouncing that incorrectly. I have not met her.
Does anyone know anything about this group in Dallas, Kelly Neidert? I don't know anything about this particular group.
She organized a protest of a family-friendly drag show, along with other individuals and white nationalist groups who showed up as well. And what they did is they surrounded the club holding the event, Mr. Mister, which was in like a gay neighborhood.
Every single one of us has probably heard about this drag show. Oh, Adam's upset. Is he? Is he? Sorry, Adam. You shouldn't have thrown me under the bus, dude. And then you definitely shouldn't have doubled down on it. I'm not sorry. I don't apologize. Adam, you are going to do your video next week anyway. No, Adam can suck a dick. You could have apologized, dude, when you had many plethora of opportunity to apologize and you never did. I don't owe you shit. I have no loyalty to you at all. And you're just going to have to live with it, man. I said what I said. I don't take it back. Yeah, take a number and get in line. Oh my God. All right. So someone sent me the link for that group. Hang on. Let me look for that link real quick. Project Protect Texas Kids. Hang on. I know you guys can't see what I'm looking at. I just want to make sure. I don't know anything about this group. So if anyone knows anything, please let me know. I'll take a quick look around their website.
In the suburb of Dallas, they chanted groomer at the families and kids who were lining up on the sidewalk to get into the event. They got up in their faces. One of them was waving a Christo-fascist or Christian nationalist flag. And the children are just standing in line there, plugging their ears with their fingers as white nationalists are yelling at them and their parents about child rape through a megaphone. And this one guy who was captured on a video said, "The fist of Christ will come down on you very soon," while screaming again at this scene of kids and their parents.
Was that fucking...
So for hours this went on.
That was fucking John Doyle. That was John Doyle that did that. I fucking knew John Doyle's little thing where he moseyed up with his fucking frat bros and was like, John Doyle went to that event and had like a megaphone and was going, "Repent, repent." I was like, what the hell are you doing? I think stuff like this is a good lesson that, this is exactly what I was saying at the top and why I will not allow people to insult trans people overtly on my channel. It's like, everything you say in public will be used against you. And I'm not saying you can't express your ideas. You're always allowed to express your ideas. But the problem is that sometimes you need to be smart about how you're expressing your ideas. It was not smart for John Doyle to go to that drag show and show up with a bunch of like frat bar looking people with a megaphone going, "Repent, repent sinners, repent. It's like, that is absolutely going to be used against all of us. And the thing of it too is it gains absolutely nothing. If there was a gain to be had in protesting in that way, I would be all for it. But it doesn't move the needle for us. It doesn't move us closer to the goals. And that's really the problem. It's like, we have to be smart about how we're doing this stuff, and just showing up with a megaphone and yelling things. If it doesn't advance us towards the goals, then you have to ask, like, are you actually detracting? Are you giving the left something that they can turn and use against us later? It's the same thing with the book banning. These people use the book banning bullshit against us all the time. And it's just like, man, can we just approach this as in a smart way for once?
On some of them were reciting sidewalk prayers, sort of reminiscent of anti-abortion groups outside clinics. Some of them directly threatened people, followed them to their cars, and then recorded themselves in these confrontations that they instigated. And then a little more than 48 hours later, Tucker Carlson was airing heavily edited versions of these videos in a segment that he introduced with "Just Another Weekend in Weimar." And Texas Republican lawmakers shortly after pledged to introduce legislation to ban drag shows in the presence of minors.
I agree, Vince.
With Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, the federal representatives, voicing their support. So Protect Texas Kids announced this rally by sharing a post about the event from the Libs of TikTok Twitter account.
Wait, hang on. Adam is upset. He said anything you said about it was a lie, then proceeded to talk about how best to monetize the story. I thought it was brave for him to finally talk about it until nothing I said was a lie. Not a single thing I said was a lie. So I don't know what story Adam is concocting that he's going to share on his stream, but not a single thing that I said was a lie.
It has 1.4 million followers. They often share, flyers for drag events. They share videos from TikTok and other places of queer and trans folks. They really like honing in on librarians,
Thanks for the
educators,
publicity,
like anybody
Adam.
that they think is like a bad influence on children, essentially. And they're a really powerful sort of mobilizer because they have this huge audience. So they shared this flyer. Protect Texas Kids shared the flyer, had the date, location, and there was part of this mega drag thread. There's lots of these events that Libs of TikTok is like regularly pushing out to their audience. One of the other things Libs of TikTok has been doing is targeting hospitals that provide gender affirming care to young people. After this campaign, multiple bomb threats were made to the Boston Children's Hospital at the end of the summer. Libs of TikTok also amplified threats that were made in September by the Daily Wire blogger and podcaster Matt Walsh. He claimed he was investigating a pediatric gender affirming care clinic at the Children's Hospital at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. And in another tactic reminiscent of anti-abortion groups, Walsh just singled out the doctors by name. And almost immediately, Tennessee Republican Governor Bill Lee joined Walsh's call for an investigation into the hospital, followed closely by Tennessee Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn, and said, let's hope they act immediately to stop this crime. And the hospital, after being harassed and threatened after this, removed the clinic's page from their website. So a couple days after this, Protect Texas Kids is back. They don't go all the way to Tennessee. They found another drag event at a church in Texas, which is like a queer affirming church that had this like drag closet for kids, and it was a place where they could get clothes that suited them, particularly if like their families like weren't supporting them. The church was a supportive place for them. And they were doing a drag bingo fundraiser for this like trans kids program.
Oh, the captions are back.
This
Good.
little church in Katy, Texas. Steve Bannon talks about it on his program. He promotes this protest, has a guest on who calls the protest a spiritual battle, and that the goal of it was to stop parents from supporting their trans kids. And at this one, we saw a neo-Nazi group called the Aryan Freedom Network, and also Proud Boys were present, and some protesters carried swastika flags along with anti-Semitic and homophobic signs. So just in a couple of weeks from Walsh starting his campaign, we see numerous threats and calls for violence that have been directed at hospitals across the country. And that children's hospital he targeted announced it was going to stop providing gender-affirming surgeries to those under 18.
Good.
And he wasn't done. He capped this off with a sort of a victory lap. He held a rally to end child mutilation in Nashville a week or so ago, along with Blackburn and also Tulsi Gabbard.
So I want to say this about Matt Walsh. I have shit on Matt Walsh extensively. And I don't regret any of the shitting on Matt Walsh that I have done because I think he damn well deserves a lot of it. However, I will say this. I am glad and pleasantly surprised that Matt Walsh is actually starting to do things in the real world, like hold rallies and actively getting stuff taken out of the Bro, you just got blocked. Congratulations. I hope it was worth it. Again, guys, I have 2 rules in this chat. Don't be a dick and no whining. If you break those rules repeatedly and I give you a warning, you ain't going to be in the chat much longer after that. But I am pleasantly surprised that Matt Walsh is actually beginning to do things that actually have real world implications. My issue with Matt Walsh is that I perceive him to be a grifter that uses these issues to elevate and maintain his status and to make money. If Matt Walsh actually wants to get in the sidelines and do real activism, and by real activism, I don't mean showing up at a school board meeting in a town you don't live in to give a speech just so you can go on Tucker Carlson and say you did it. I don't mean that. But in terms of like rallies or actually getting these surgeries like ended at hospitals, hey, I'm all for it, man. So good for Matt Walsh for actually doing something in the real world, and I hope that he keeps it up.
And Proud Boys, who showed up once the rally was already underway, and what people there said kind of looked like this like planned militaristic entrance, like a show of force. With the state troopers, you know, just kind of standing between them and all the people who showed up to support trans kids, and mostly drowned out the speakers. But then it got kind of pitched as like 2 sides in a fight when, you know, what was going on was an attempt to sort of defend the community from all of these people. And of course, after the rally, you know, none of the elected officials there present said anything to condemn the Proud Boys' presence. So that's just a kind of a snapshot of what this cycle is, of how things are moving from these confrontations in particular places, documented. They get onto Fox News, that generates more social media content, which generates more protests, and it's just been spinning like this for months. And of course, it goes back further, but I will wait until we get into that later.
So she's upset that parents are upset that kids are having trans surgery before they're 18.
Frame of what is new in this conjuncture, right? So attacks on queer and trans people have been happening for a long time. There have been fascists in America a long time. Is there something about this moment that you feel like has some novelty or some change?
I'll pop in there.
Yeah, please, Max.
You know, I was actually jotting down some notes on like what's new in this moment, you know, and that's everything from like the technology that we use to share the information and the ways in which they create silos for themselves. Like that's what the right and folks have been getting good at for the last several decades, is how to create these silos of information where they can all gather and brainwash each other, and not allow in any qualitative new information to allow for their growth and learning. But what I really think is actually the most profound part about what's happening in our current political climate is the desperation of the elite. You see, the devastation that we see around us is due to like capitalism ending, and they absolutely need a section of the working class.
The devastation around us is due to capitalism ending. Okay, so as a reminder, actually, let me pop quiz for people in the chat. What are the 4 goals of the woke left? And by woke left, I do include these people in it. Woke left, I define as the authoritarian left, of which I do believe real socialists and communists are actually, you know, definitely part of that. What are the 4 goals of the woke left? Does anyone in the chat know? I know some of you in the chat know because I've repeated it 8,000 times from Sunday. If you want to understand why these people believe what they do and advance what they do, what are their goals? Yes, bot. Well done. The 4 goals of the woke left, always and forever, are the following: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Every single thing that they do leads to one or more of those goals. Okay? gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. This person in particular, when they were introduced, they said that this person is working on abolishing all private property because they want everyone to be beholden to the state. Well done. And I see some other people got it in the chat as well. We got Incognito getting it right. Dragonwater getting it right. Elena, yup, you got part of it. And capitalism, exactly. Exactly. Reagan got it right. Singh got it right. Kind of. But they don't actually really care about the Constitution, to be honest. They don't care about that. Yes, they do try to destabilize the family, but that's not usually they do. So when we're talking about destabilizing the family, usually that's about destabilizing the system. Well done, everyone. Well, yes. They want to destabilize things so that we go to the state for help. And I mean, like, to be honest, King Peter of the chat, are they really wrong? Like, when the pandemic happened, what did we do? We ran right to the state for help. We stayed in our homes 15 days to slow the spread. A lot of people got shots they didn't need. Are they wrong that destabilizing the system is going to lead to society being dependent on the state? Of course not. Exactly, Beth. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Well done. Great job, everyone.
To usher in the new but kind of old form of what we're calling like neo-feudalism as our next economic system. The truth is, and we spoke on this, right? The truth is like that the rise of fascism for thousands of years began with attacks on queer people, trans people, women, POC, and it's what Hitler did and the Nazis did in Berlin. It's what the industrial South
Hitler
did,
attacked trans people
before that, and so on. And where we're starting to see these big changes is in the fact that like there is so much devastation happening around us, and all of us are trying to make sense of that devastation, whether no matter what side of this thing we're on.
Hitler was very well known for attacking trans people,
and that right there is like what's causing us to now be willing to no longer engage in discourse in the streets about it, that like this is a moment of survival for many people. And it is giving, and they're using this disaster as a way to like mobilize their base, this fascist base for their fascist thinking, to be able to, like I said, usher in this new economic system.
Sheila T, is there anything you'd like to add before you ask LV a
yes,
question?
please, Sheila T.
Not super specifically. I was also going to point out maybe the like technological changes and how those have kind of just like facilitated and helped like further decentralize and like aid a lot of people to kind of like mutually brainwash each other and feel empowered to kind of like act across like much bigger geographical areas. But I feel like most of that was touched on.
Mm-hmm. LV, you're welcome to add to this, but I wanted to ask the next question, sort of going
that woman
back
scares me with the pink hair
a little bit, sort of thinking about
she's actually
immediate
frightening
antecedents or preceding events to the current conjuncture. Could you share about the history of Bashback? And for audience members who might know nothing about the organization, the network, and its history.
Sure. Yeah, Bashback was kind of made a big splash, but was very short-lived from like 2008 to 2011. It got its start in,
I don't want to tune into that.
Street clashes.
Why would you do that to me, Dragonwater?
In Milwaukee and in other cities in the Midwest. And it's sort of, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in the last year in particular is, what made Bashback kind of happen in that moment and not in this moment. The network of Bashback, because it was sort of like, felt like there was thousands of, militant queers that were supporting each other and publicizing their actions and doing, kind of like hyping each other up to fight back against, homophobia, transphobia, racism, like a number, sexual violence, like a number of different things. And I think, I just feel like one of the aspects that made bashback somewhat, just made it.
I want to take this question from Charles because it is a really salient point. Did they ever define what their definition of fascism is? No. And they never do. They never define what fascism is. They never define what transphobia is. They never define what homophobia is. They never define what misogyny is. Because generally speaking, everyone that disagrees with them is going to fall into one of those buckets. So no, they never present definitions of anything. This person's energy is very, very creepy, and I don't like it. It's like this person has very low self-esteem. I'll tell you that.
Different was just the coming together of people. I think that in 2008, when the broadcasting and the kind of like social dimension of these actions made this sort of like the experience around queer self-defense and queer violence like more powerful, I would say. And so like in 2008, when there was this clash in Milwaukee, it was sort of like they circulated a picture of themselves like wearing these pink masks and holding bats, and wrote like a little communique and posted it on anarchistnews.org, which just seemed to be like a big deal at that time. I felt like in the late 2000s, it felt very much like the revolutionary left was kind of dominated by like anarchist discourse. And so, that kind of like created a container for that discussion, and people were able to kind of discuss in these comment forums, I guess sort of like, in a Reddit like vibe, all of these different kind of actions and sort of like organize themselves to form chapters in other cities and in different capacities. And so from that kind of like experience, people called for a convergence in Minneapolis. And then there was another convergence, which was very large in Chicago. And then the final one was it was in Denver. And I think that the convergence model is another aspect of bashback that I kind of feel like I have mixed feelings about it. I feel like on one hand, it enabled the conditions to bring people together in this kind of like, very visible way. And on the other hand, it was, I think like most people probably in this panel and maybe like the listeners will probably agree that it's sort of like when you bring together a lot of like radicals or just anybody, conflict is going to arise. And it's sort of like bashback is ironically like formed around conflict, around like facing conflict head on, but it's sort of like the interpersonal conflict is what seems to tank these projects like consistently. And I feel like that was the case with bashback. It's sort of like in Denver, we had, we made a lot of like efforts to do conflict mediation within the different people that were coming to the convergence. However, it's sort of like some of these like splits just became unmanageable. And I think there was also kind of like an ideological split there too, where it was sort of like there's kind of like a community building aspect of like self-defense and saying like, okay, we're going to mostly focus on like legible targets and neo-Nazis and different.
How are you
like
defining
very,
neo-Nazi?
Like, and then there's sort of more like what I would consider like kind of an anarcho-insurrectionist approach, which is more like we're going to attack in the multiplicity of ways that this violence this oppression is enacting on us. So it's more kind of like how do we confront bigots on the street? And it's very difficult to like organize a group of people around that. Whereas like kind of anarcho-insurrectionist response is more like, okay, well, we're fighting all the time and this fight never.
What is an anarcho-insurrectionist? Does anyone have any ideas? What is an anarcho-insurrectionist? Like, this person is a communist, so they might say they're an anarcho-communist, but I've never heard the term anarcho-insurrectionist.
never ends, and it's sort of like a pure, we're kind of like embracing this like pure negation. And so Bashback kind of was the synthesis of these two different like approaches. And I think that for like a brief moment, it was like a really beautiful synthesis and could have been a very powerful one. But I think ultimately like there wasn't, they're somewhat incompatible, but like I don't think that we were able to kind of hold those two together and move forward with them, which is probably what it would have taken for that to last. So I guess I feel like, I feel like I absolutely feel like there needs to be something like Bashback right now. I think like, especially for supporting youth that are engaging in defense right now, like in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, we had, a number of street clashes with Nazis around the WeSpa stuff, and so people are doing this self-defense action, but it's the
Sin
more
got something.
social aspect of it that seems to be like missing from that component. Sort of like the isolated actions are happening, but like the communication and the almost like celebration and the hyping up of each other around those actions is not really like, I think we need to strategize to how to create that a new container that makes sense for this moment.
One aspect that you spoke about, but I was hoping you could elaborate a little bit more, is the way Bashback networked people across the country and also had some international connections, and the sort of a little bit about the scope and the kind of networked quality of it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of that was the fact that Aragorn had created this platform with anarchistnews.org, and kind of like just contain that.
They're in Europe,
dialogue.
Sin. That makes sense.
So it's essentially like somebody.
The reason I say that it makes sense that they'd be in Europe is that a lot of the communist presentations come from Europe. Like, it's actually very rare to watch a communist presentation where there isn't a European, or like there's usually at least one European in it. I don't know exactly why that is, but it is very rare that they are just like all Americans.
That was sympathetic to the Bashback cause was like allow like creating a space for this conversation to happen, whereas like the dialogues that are happening around self-defense right now, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on like TikTok or a number of different platforms, are just these kind of like sites of corporate alienation that like no actual like in-person organizing can come out of those kind of experiences. So I personally think that the social, like being in proximity to each other, is really important. So these convergences were important. And I think it was like,
okay, so Sin just sent me the Wikipedia entry for insurrectionary anarchism. And here's what it says. Insurrectionary anarchism is a revolutionary theory and tendency within the anarchist movement that emphasizes insurrection as a revolutionary practices. It is critical of formal organizations such as labor unions and federations that are based on a political program and periodic, there we go, congresses. Instead, insurrectionary anarchists advocate informal organization and small affinity groups-based organization. Insurrectionary anarchists put value in attack, permanent class conflict, and a refusal to negotiate or compromise with class enemies. So whoever said that the goal of the anarcho-insurrectionists is to create a permanent revolution, good on you, man. Gold star for the day. You were right.
At that point in like the late 2000s, it was like the
that's definitely
DNC
Antifa.
and the RNC convergences were like these mass mobilizations that brought together a lot of like the revolutionary left to be together and kind of like learn the skills of bringing that number of people together. And so like Bashback kind of like was a part of that context. And I think that we've lost some of those skills over the years, like the skills of just being able to like handle a group of like 500,000 people that are like coming into a city, like housing, food, like, but the conflict management and like all those different things are aspects of it.
Thank you so much. It's just really fascinating history. So next, I wanted to ask first Sheila T. and then Max, if you could share a little bit about some tactics and strategies around mutual aid, care, self-defense that you're seeing on the ground, that you've encountered or been a part of or seen, and what you think works, what you think is helpful to people. So Sheila T.
Yeah, I feel like what I've been seeing for the last, I don't know, 5 to 7-ish years in Philly has been, in terms of mutual aid, a lot of information sharing and like distribution of like pepper spray and stuff like that in terms of like queers who are tied up in sex work stuff, or just like bad date lists, and yeah, just like information about which like how to get work done in ways that are like safer. And on the other hand, I feel like, yeah, people just kind of more informally networking with each other to kind of like have protection for work or not for work.
Oh,
Just in
Vermont
life,
is
and like
totally
having
gone.
like
Vermont is
people that
gone.
they can call, and kind of like developing both that as like as a social network or like set of social networks, and also as like a set of skills to like de-escalate or escalate. And I think a lot of that is not completely separate from, I guess I would say maybe like two things, and this is like partially tying back to some of the bashback stuff. I feel like one is that, at least here, it's like after a certain point, it just felt like the like anti-fascist organizing was just like queers were overly represented in that world. And so it,
What?
even though maybe from the outside or from like reading what people wrote, it wasn't always like super clear that it was like queer and trans people involved in like organizing against fascists and far right people, but I feel like that was a thing, and I feel like
I just want to make a note here. And listen, I generally speaking have a lot of sympathy for people like this. I look at this person and I see them as very emotionally stunted. I see them as having a lot of self-worth issues, and that's probably why they have fallen in with literal communists. So I'm not saying they are devoid of responsibility for the choices that they've made in their life. I'm just saying I look at this person and they can't look at the camera. They don't even have a functional camera. They're speaking like they're a teenager at a school board meeting. And I find the whole thing to be very sad. Um the reason I bring that up is that I often find that people that are involved in this sort of stuff are very, very broken, right? And they get involved in it because it gives them like a feeling of camaraderie and stuff like that. But there is no reason in the world we should be losing to these people. This is the real point I want to make. There is no reason in the world that we should be losing to these people. If this person can be a successful organizer with a shitty camera and low self-esteem and talking like they're the vice president of the school board, or not even the school board, not the school board, the student council. That's what I meant. The student council, like they're in high school. If this person can be an organizer, no one has any excuses, guys. We are losing to these people. And we're not losing by a little bit. We are losing by a lot. I know a lot of you are really disinclined towards the idea of doing activism. However, if you don't do activism, nothing ever changes. And when you refuse to do it, people like this come in and they say, I might not be the best person to do this in the world, but I'm going to do it anyway. And they show up and they try their best and they get involved and they speak to people and they do things, and even though they are really not suited for this at all, they end up being more successful than you did because you did nothing and they did something. There's no reason why we should be losing to them. It's really sad.
Also brought certain like skills and like ways of thinking to those networks that spilled beyond people who are just organizing against fascist stuff. Like one example I can think of from before COVID that like has kept going is that a lot of anti-fascists started practicing like different like boxing and like combat sports, and then that kind of like spilled out and became like just like a larger than anti-fascist like anarchist thing, and then that spilled out larger and like was like open to like queers and anarchists and anti-fascists and kind of like their friends and networks as well.
It's Antifa combat training is what it is.
And then on the other side, like kind of like less tied up with strictly anti-fascism and more tying up to this kind of idea of like insurrectionary anarchy as it like was playing out with the bashback stuff. I feel like there were a good amount of like, yeah, just like different attacks and sabotages that took place. Almost all of them were anonymous, but some of them that had like responsibility claims or like any sort of like written communication were like written either like clearly influenced by queer theory and like queer ideas, or like claimed by people who, while like maintaining anonymity, like they were like gay or trans or queer or dykes or whatever. And
Douglas, that video about Tim Pool brought me here today. There was this dude making fun of Tim Pool shagging in his mansion. Then Carlin was making some interesting points. So I checked out the channel. Welcome, Douglas. I do a variety of content. Socialism Saturday is but one of that variety of content that I'm do. I'm glad you made it here, and I hope you enjoy the community.
I feel like that, I imagine like network of people or groups of people like had to figure out the ways to like seek out and develop the like means to like do violence in the same way that the anti-fascists.
Hang on. Red Room Diecast says, I don't know, Carlin. I've been listening in and it's genuine as this panel seems to try to be. They lost me at church with a trans closet, two concepts that truly should not go together. Then you're missing the point of what Socialism Saturday is. No one is suggesting that you agree with these people. I actually think agreeing with these people would be a really bad idea. The point of Socialism Saturday is not to agree with them, is not to be convinced by them. The point of Socialism Saturday is to understand them and to understand what they're doing and to understand the language that they're using and to understand how they show up in the world and to understand their perspective, because you cannot beat an enemy that you do not understand. And these people are right now winning. These people are dictating the talking points of the Democratic Party. They are. Except what we're watching right now is like 5 years ahead of where the Democratic Party is. So we need to watch it and we need to understand it, not because anything these people say makes sense, because it does not make sense, but we watch it and try to understand it, because the point is that we cannot beat them if we do not understand them. That's all.
Had to, and I think that also that brought a lot of like collective and individual empowerment to like those people in the networks that were around them as well.
Thank you. And Max.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And similar, right? Where it's like like engaging in like mutual learning and information sharing. What we're seeing working is like engaging in public facing events, you know. This like allows for folks to find ways to plug in and new folks to support their affinity / community building with. Oftentimes, you know, these folks are coming, their families are, you know, not as deep in the weeds, and they
every time they
friends,
say, folks, you have to drink.
I oftentimes speak with youth who are like, everybody around me isn't talking about this stuff. And so we have to create spaces for them to come and meet other youth or other people who are talking about this stuff. And for us, 2020 really opened up the door to for the anti-fascism, but also anti-fascist self-defense tactics. You know, Antifa got airwaves like never before. And you know, what is
Look how
Antifa trended on
excited.
Google searches for days, you know, during those times. So creating things like anarchist book fairs in the areas that don't, you know, normally have them. Sacramento, we compete with the Bay all the time, you know. But here we have everything from like queer self-defense groups that are community forward facing, that allow for community members to hit us up and be like, where are y'all training this weekend? So I can join you. They train every Sunday. We have a forward-facing queer defense formation that walks our queer district in Sacramento. We have events where queers can come and paint bricks. In Sac, we have Pride Was a Riot, who's dope, and is pink in a pink bandana, masked up and tabling at the farmers market on Saturdays. Even further, they did a campaign to get every vendor at that market to have signs that say, "We support trans kids." It's those forward public facing efforts that are normalizing not just like anti-fascism, but different tactics of self-defense, and all of its tactics, whether that's physically self-defending
Okay.
and using.
I want you to think about what this person has just said. This person has just described to you how they want to normalize anti-fascism by making sure there is an Antifa presence at community events, and they're participating in things with the community. When they're participating in those things in the community, do you think they're showing up in like black masks with their umbrellas and generally acting like crazy people trying to burn shit down and like break windows and blow stuff up? No. No. They're trying to position themselves as part of the community and protectors of the community and advocates for the community. And I think that that's really, really important for people to understand. Antifa is as successful as they are at doing what they do because the communities are allowing them to be as successful as they are. Antifa basically took over downtown Portland. They couldn't have done that if the community hadn't allowed them to. Those of you who dismiss this point do so at your own peril. These people are not just showing up and blowing shit up. They're getting involved in actual community activities. They're showing up when people are in a good mood. They're showing up and trying to endear themselves to the people around them so that when they do blow something up, the community is going to try to defend them. It's an extremely smart way to go about it. It's extremely smart. That's why these people are winning.
Using things like pepper spray or physical self-defense tactics, or creating a culture in a community that provides that safety just by people walking in knowing that they're welcome. Things like that have proved the most helpful, and have proved to support folks in their entering or in their introduction to anti-fascism and the anti-fascist orgs in town. And it's allowed for us to meet folks where they're at with it too, you know? And we always talk about the different things that go into supporting this work. You know, we all see those.
Okay. But why are they not prosecuted? Why are they not prosecuted? Keep moving backwards. Guys, I promise you that if you show up and you say Antifa is winning because of the Democrats, you're going to accomplish nothing. Saying they're winning because of the Democrats is not going to be a successful strategy. They are winning because they are involving themselves in the community and endearing themselves with the community and building relationships with those prosecutors so that when they blow something up, the prosecutor is going to be ill-inclined. They literally just told us this. You really have to go beyond the surface level with this and understand how they're doing what they're doing. If you aren't willing to do that, then we're going to lose. This is incorrect. To me, it's just a bunch of people with no personality trying to find one. Overprivileged, understimulated, self-oppressed, people who know nothing of which they speak. Well, Red Room Diecast, I'll ask you the same question that I often ask of people who assert stuff like this on Socialism Saturday. If this is all true, if these people are just a bunch of people with no personality that are overprivileged, understimulated, self-oppressed, if all that is true, then why are they winning? Because to be quite frank, if you're losing, if you're, and by your I really mean we, if we are losing to a bunch of people with no personality who are overprivileged, understimulated, and self-oppressed, and we're still losing to them, and we're losing badly to them, that is a really sad state of affairs. So I'm going to recommend that maybe you don't dismiss them out of hand, because if you do, it means you're losing to a lot of losers. And so maybe we shouldn't dismiss their tactics off the bat, because their tactics are winning.
Flyers where there's like 10 support roles to a protest and things like that, you know, whether that's you're safely doing it from your home for all different kinds of able body types, right? We're being very inclusive in our ability in our ability to get involved, but in how we're meeting our community where they're at. And then during 2020, you know, we held events that did everything that we called them "We Keep Us Safe" events, and they talked about everything from tear gas and tourniquets to abolition through an indigenous framework and gender 101 that went on like once a week throughout that time. And so this ability to create, again, public facing, and we can't be afraid to be like, we're anti-fascists, you know, like they got the lit out on their table every Saturday at the farmers market. You know, they got it. They got those big circles and those big A's everywhere. Oh, you know, it's normalizing it, but by creating the ways for us to get publicly involved and to be meeting our community where they're at. Not only are we like normalizing these things, but we're also letting them recognize that we're their community. We are the community that they want to be a part of when they say they want housing as a human right, when they say they want healthcare for all, when they say they want food access for everybody, that like this is actually an anarcho-communist thought and theory, and they don't even recognize that they are objectively this way. We need them to recognize it in their subjective lives as well. So yeah, that's about it for us, is like that forward facing, being willing to engage in dialogue, discussion, information sharing, and mutual learning.
Oh, that's beautiful. So we're going to open it up between each other. I have a question for everybody, but it's also an opportunity to respond to each other and to begin to sort of draw out themes or things that are evocative for you. And then at some point, I'll start throwing in some questions from the audience on YouTube.
Yes, it was deeply
So the
stunning and
question
brave.
for everybody to
Deeply
open our
stunning, very
discussion
brave.
is, what do you see as the value of self-defense in the current moment? And Max spoke to that in quite a number of ways just now.
I guess I would say that self-defense is as important as ever, and maybe like something to like pay particular attention to, just because of the like ways that queer and trans people have been like more pointedly targeted. But I don't know, like in the sense that like self-defense is just literally essential for surviving. That for me, it feels like, yeah, it could never not be an important thing. And I feel like specifically like as queer and trans people, we're like often like alienated and disempowered from like access to like violence and defense, and that like now is as good of a time as any to like develop the means and skills and networks to like be able to take care of ourselves and each other.
Hang on, I know I just got a super chat in. Let me see. Emphasize, read my I couldn't $5 super chat, $5 super sticker. I don't see a $5 super sticker, emphasize. I don't see what you're talking about. I'm sorry. I also don't see a $5 super sticker. Oh, is this what you're talking about? Only if I could record and broadcast my therapy sessions. Being straight is a crime under the conversion therapy lens is deemed harmful to my children. I don't believe that's true, emphasize. And I think that policing yourself as a victim is not the smartest thing that you've ever done. So I don't believe that that's true. Thank you for the money.
I think maybe I'll just add on. It's so important right now
Oh,
because
super sticker just
I
came
spoke
through.
to it
Thank you,
earlier about the
emphasize.
devastation that we're seeing around us, and that like on all fronts are we being attacked. That's from everything from like state violence to far right extremist Christo fascism, that extremism, religious extremism, because that is happening globally in different forms of religion, and even ecological devastation. You know what I mean? Like we are literally fighting for our lives and our survival, and so defending our joy, but like organizing our rage around how to defend ourselves from the very things that are trying to convince us and gaslight us about the very real devastation that's happening in our communities, is absolutely the way forward. Because then also when because this is also like the piece in me, right? Is that if we were all actually just moving from the form of like self-defense, then inevitably what we get to is that somebody one day is not throwing the first punch, you know? And so to speak on it in such terms and such beauty, to talk about self-defense as like not a struggle for our lives, but the right for our lives, is very important right now.
We're
Because like I
literally
said,
dying.
our very existence is at stake.
I think, like, for me,
Hang on. This is a common misperception that I feel like the need to dispel. And Red Room Diecast, I promise I'm not picking on you. You're setting me up beautifully, and I appreciate you for that. Forgive me if I seem out of step with what you're talking about, but I do see a change coming. The more these people get exposed, the more things will change in our favor. No, that is not correct. And anyone who thinks that's correct needs to really reevaluate their perspective right now. These people have taken over every major institution in society. Any influencer that is telling you that the woke left is about to be defeated is lying to you. They are not going anywhere. They have control over every major institution. They have almost 100% of the power. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. This problem will not be solved in our lifetimes. The very best that we can hope to do in our lifetimes is to set the next generation up to be able to make progress where we couldn't. That's it. We are so far away from turning this around, it's not even funny. And there are a lot of people out there who aren't paying attention to what's going on at the institutional level. They aren't paying attention to how these people have gotten their policies into every major school district, not even major, every school district in the United States at a policy level, not something that the school board can change. And they've been doing it for over a decade, really, really heavily in the schools. You cannot unwind a problem like that that's been going on for a decade. And they've been doing it longer in the schools from that. When I say a decade, that's when they really started to integrate their next level crazy. But they were in the schools long before that. So I'm not suggesting it just started 10 years ago. I'm saying the next level crazy shit started about 10 years ago, to the best that I can tell. And so, no, we can expose this stuff. We can talk about it. And that's what we're doing. But people need to start being realistic about this, that if people don't actually start doing something about it, it's over. These people are too far ahead. And it's not going to get turned back in a year. It's not going to get turned back in 2 years. It's not even going to get turned back in 10 years. We are talking about a generational problem. And people need to be realistic about that. And anyone who tells you anything else either does not understand what they are talking about or they are lying to you. Let me say, I know I got a couple of super chats, and thank you guys for those super chats. Beth says, gotta say, Carlin, we may not agree on everything, but regarding your chat responses, kudos. Thank you, that Beth. I appreciate it. Emphasize, you can't say I'm not true to my word. Well, you do have that quality about you, Emphasize. I will absolutely give you that, and thank you for that. Let me see. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up, because when you guys ask good questions, that gives me the opportunity to answer the questions. And so I appreciate it. King Peter of the chat says, the problem is that if their tactic is political violence is normal, we either have to embrace violence or find a novel tactic, because political violence is always wrong has failed. Peter, that's one that's going to keep me up tonight. Thank you for that. I had not thought about that before, Peter. Huh. All right. Great. Thank you. Let's keep going.
Yeah, self-defense is it's an interesting way to frame like violence, because I think that we can all agree that it's a euphemism for violence. And a lot of times when you kind of like, let's say there's a classic like instance of like a bigot that's confronting you, or whatever, they're like the escalation of that situation to violence is like it's a whole process, and it's a complicated process. And so it's sort of like, for me, it's kind of like, I guess, less about the act of violence and more about like, how are we like socially organizing ourselves?
Hey, Kevin,
around,
how are you?
Supporting ourselves in a revolutionary way, and like having our kind of like eyes on the prize for
Snaps.
the fact that like our, like everyone is saying our system is killing us, and especially
literally
like
dying.
Trans folks, like queer, trans, especially trans women of color that are sex workers, are like the front lines of this. And I don't even hear people like counting how many trans women are being murdered every year, but anymore. Like I feel like they did that around like 2014 and the like trans tipping point, and it's not even happening, but I'm sure that it's like astronomical. And so I guess it's kind of like, for me, it's like that social aspect is really important, and that's sort of like where like militancy comes in. And not militancy, I think that like we have a tendency to kind of see militancy as like, oh, let's train ourselves in these different kind of like armed combat scenarios, and like let's
that's what they
trained up for
they
using guns, and let's get trained up in like martial arts and in a variety of different ways, which are of course important. But I think like there's another aspect to like military training that
does anyone know why they snap? I know the answer to this, but I want to see if you guys know. Do you know why they snap? You guys are not going to believe the answer when I tell it to you. I'm sure there are many reasons. I know one of the reasons. Any guesses about why they snap their fingers when they want to signal approval? It's because clapping, exactly, clapping is triggering for some people. That's not a joke. Clapping is considered to be triggering for some people. And so instead of clapping, they do snapping. And the reason I know that is because some of you know this. I spent about 10 years in higher education. And after I stopped working in higher education directly, I still did consulting with higher ed through my organizational psychology practice. I worked with like a lot of like executive teams and like cabinet level stuff and things like that. And so one of the things that started happening right around the time where I was kind of ending my tenure working in higher ed, because by the way, there's nothing that sucks worse than like working in higher education. one of the things that was happening was there were discussions on college campuses about, do we ban clapping and force students to use snapping or like jazz fingers instead of clapping because clapping was considered too traumatic for college freshmen? That was a real thing. That is higher education in America.
A lot of times I think we miss, and it's like a broader social kind of like experience of like, you know, and it's sort of like when people on the left say, oh, we're outgunned in all of these different ways, which is true. We are like literally outgunned.
Campaigns are not only, they're not only done through like arms, they're done through like a social kind of like organization of armies. So not only the logistics, but also the training kind of like strategies and how you bring people together to train them, how you feed them while they're going through this process, how you navigate like interpersonal conflict through all of those things. And so, you know, in thinking about like Bashback in particular, that's where I kind of like feel like these convergences were like just the tip of the iceberg for what could have been. Like I really feel like Bashback was like an aborted movement. Like it was something that could
An
have
aborted
happened,
movement.
and it just fell apart through the whole variety of like things. But you know, I think those convergences
What an
are
odd
like
choice of
that
words.
kind of like component of like our, you know, the left is very skilled in these
This is very
these
easy to
social
understand,
dynamics,
Bot. You're right.
far more skilled than the right, and look at how much it takes for like the police and the army to maintain their social cohesion and all of the money that goes.
So this person with pink hair just said something really important, and I just want to go back and replay it again. And they basically said the left is really skilled in these things, far more skilled than the right. And the reason I think that's significant is oftentimes when we watch like our happy hour trainings that we do on Fridays on my second channel, oftentimes we'll find people that are on the left that flat out admit they're like, we like they don't admit, they assert that the right is way better at us than organizing. This is how you can distinguish between a true believer and a useful idiot, or a useful innocent, as it were, but we're going to use idiots because it's Socialism Saturday. And this is how we know LV is a true believer. The useful idiots believe that the right is just as good at organizing, if not better at organizing, than the political left. The true believers, like LV, know damn well that the right sucks at political organizing. They know it and they use it to their advantage.
Tip of the iceberg for what could have been. Like I really feel like Bashback was like an aborted movement. Like it was something that could have happened, and it just fell apart through the whole variety of like things. But you know, I think those convergences are like that kind of like component of like our, you know, the left is very skilled in these social dynamics, far more skilled than the right, and
Correct.
and look at how much it takes for like the police and the army to maintain
Hang
their
on.
social cohesion.
No. You guys really need to stop making this excuse. The right is too busy working and raising the family. The family might be true enough, but the political right does itself no favors when they're like, we can't do things because we have jobs and they don't have jobs and we have jobs and that's why we can't do anything. Bro, the left controls every major institution in America. You're going to tell me with a straight face that they control every major institution in America and they don't have jobs? Of course they have jobs. Not only do they have jobs, they're doing their jobs more successfully than you are because it's what's getting them up the ladder in every major institution in America until they get up to leadership positions. The left is kicking your ass at jobs. They're kicking your ass in their profession. So stop saying that you're the ones with jobs. They have jobs too. And in fact, they're so good at their jobs that they're getting promoted to leadership positions in their jobs, which is how they control every major institution.
Cohesion and all of the money that goes into maintaining that, whereas we have no money and we're still more socially powerful. And so I think it's something that we need to remember about, like, you know, violence and self-defense and kind of like, you know, revolutionary, like our revolutionary potential.
I just want to add to what everyone has said, sort of the public facing side of self-defense and community defense, which I think Max articulated in a way I hadn't really thought of before, which is, you know, these are ways to bring people in, and they're also ways for people who, like, they're the journalists who are following what's going on in these anti-fascist.
Exactly. Who do you think is demanding you put your pronouns in your signatures if the left doesn't have jobs? Where do you think that idea is coming from? Who do you think is bringing the diversity training into the organization if the leftists don't have jobs? And by the way, it's not the HR people, because the HR people are getting signed off from that by their VPs and their CEOs, because those are who's paying for it. It is like the dumbest thing in the world to say we have jobs and they don't. No. Where do you think all of this stuff is coming from if they don't have jobs?
Fascist accounts that are like documenting who these various extremist groups are, who the individuals are, like they are doing the legwork so that we can do our job and help get that information out to even more people. I had people this summer asking me for the first time, do you think it's safe to go to Pride this year? Because they were hearing about all of these threats, including here in New York. And we had people come and harass a drag queen story hour in Queens a couple of weeks ago. So it's, you know, and when I thought of like, well, where do I send them to find out if it's safe? I was like, I think you should go to these anti-fascist Twitter accounts in New York, actually. Like, go see like what they are hearing, like what people feel safe sharing on Telegram, what they've seen on Telegram, like things like that, like getting that sort of, it's another kind of normalization. Like,
we need to make a list of anti-fascist Twitter accounts. I'm sure like Andy No probably has a list. Elijah Schaefer probably has a list. I need to make a list of this stuff.
This is a community resource that's here to be shared. Like, even if you might not be on the front line, like this is doing an incredible amount of community defense, even just on the level of information sharing. And I think for groups who are dealing with these attacks for like the first time, they're doing events that have never been targeted in this way. Just knowing that other people are doing it, like other people are going through it, other people have strategies, that they're not alone in that, is very important right now. Because I think some people are just like, it never would have occurred to them that like they would be attacked in this way, like in a community setting. Like, I think, there's a level of constant violence that we're still experiencing as queer and trans communities, but like people who are like, we were doing a story event at a library for children. Like, why are the Proud Boys showing up and trying to destroy that? So giving people just a sense that they are part of a community, even if they haven't experienced that yet, is really important right now.
Beautiful, beautiful responses. And I encourage people to elaborate or respond to each other as you see fit. I'll ask a few questions that have come in from...
Let me take this super chat from Emphasize. Difference in paid extremist and burger flipper. Well, again, you are overlooking the fact that they control every major institution in the country. A burger flipper doesn't control anything. The manager controls things, and then the director, and then the vice president, and then the CEO, in that reverse hierarchy. So no, we're not talking about burger flippers. We're not talking about Starbucks baristas. And if you think that they aren't focusing on working and they're still managing to climb the corporate... If you think that they are not focusing on their work and they manage to get themselves into leadership positions and they do that without focusing on their work? What does that say about how much you guys suck? That people who are not focusing on their work are getting promoted ahead of you. You need to think these things through that you say. Because if you just keep saying, we can't do this because we have jobs. That's not true. It's never been true. They have jobs as well, and they're kicking your ass at the jobs. Carlin, does the right think of these people as extremists or just misguided or nuts? I'm not sure how else to ask this question. Your opinion, please. That is a great question. The right thinks that these people are weirdos with stupid hair that they do not take seriously at all, that don't have jobs, that just basically sit around all day playing video games and pontificating. That's what the right thinks of these people. They do not believe that they are losing to these people, and that's part of the problem. Because they clearly and obviously are. But they don't believe they are. They dismiss them. They don't listen to what they're saying. They go, "Oh, they're just going to wear themselves out." No, they do not take these people seriously at all, and that's why they're losing to these people. Well, then why would you say that you can't fight them because like you're busy working? Aren't they busy working also? Why are they capable of doing activism when they have a job if you are not capable of doing activism when you have a job? The right is losing because they underestimate their opponents. Yes. Absolutely. Emphasize says their high-paying job is to gaslight us, period. No, that's not their high-paying job. That is incorrect. And again, you aren't doing anyone any favors, Emphasize. I mean, thank you for the money, but you're not doing anyone any favors.
The audience. So here's a practical legal one. Jessica asks, as a formerly incarcerated trans woman in Washington state, my CCO tells me I'm not even allowed to possess pepper spray. After a record number of trans murders last year, I feel vulnerable. Is this even legal? I said that perhaps none of us would know. There are no lawyers in our group in terms of speaking to what's legal, but I thought with people distributing pepper spray, it might have come up at some point, sort of to what extent that's restricted for people on parole, probation, or.
And because I'm in California, I can't speak on Washington State, but I can speak to, like, well, first I want to validate your very real feelings. And even if it is legal, that's the whole point, right? Fuck the state.
Hang on, I have a very nice super chat from Beth. Thank you, Beth. As someone on the right, I take them very seriously, and so do the people I listen to and associate with. They are not joking around. Sad your description does fit too many of us. So, Beth, I'm going to be really blunt with you. If I am saying something and making a generalization, it is because it is what the vast majority of people on the right are expressing. And I do pay attention to these things. I pay attention to the trends on the right. I pay attention to the trends on the left. I pay attention to the trends in the libertarians. If I am saying something, it is because it is the trend in your tribe for your tribe to be expressing that thing. Saying that's a generalization and you should stop saying it is unhelpful because it negates the fact that your loudest voices in your tribe are saying that thing. Your loudest and most influential voices in your tribe are saying that. And so if we don't acknowledge that, then we can't solve the problem. And I am positive that you are telling the truth when you say you do take these things seriously, and I think it's great that you take them seriously. I am saying that I have now been deeply immersed in all of this stuff for 3 years, much more immersed than the average person. So you might say it's only been 3 years, Carlin. Well, I've been much more immersed than the average person. I live, sleep, and breathe this stuff every single day, every day, with no vacation. And I know that the vast majority of people on the right do not take these people seriously. They are dismissive. They don't like to listen to them. They abdicate all responsibility. They say they just don't have jobs when they do have jobs. And that's a problem. It really is. It's a very big problem. All right. Thank you guys. Mount that like button if you haven't already. We're about halfway through this video and we're only 2 hours in.
They're trying to make sure we out here being killed. But what I can tell you is like, and there wasn't enough in there for me to kind of like deduce this down for you, but like, depending on if it's probation or parole, you can actually find that information. If you look at the terms of parole in your state or terms of probation in your state, most of the time that's actually not like bear mace and things like that are big things in the areas, but like little pepper spray, no, it's usually not. But like I said, I would definitely look into the probation codes and the parole codes, just depending on what you fall within for Washington.
Great. Okay, Lane asks, can you all speak to the effectiveness of having bashback blocks or large specific affinity groups that organized actions, like some of the pros and cons of that model?
Well, I mean, I feel like we're at the point where, I mean, like, I don't know. I kind of like thought that I don't know. I kind of thought that we were going to move beyond Black Bloc by this point in the anti-fascist development. I hate to say it, but like, I just find it to be a very like reductive tactic. I kind of like felt like we would get to a point where we're like doing more fluid anonymity, or what some folks call gray bloc. And but
Gray
2020 kind of like, I just was like, oh wow, it's really back, and it's really back in full force. And I think there's pros and cons to it. A lot of the actions, the bashback actions, got the definitely like people were got the attention of law enforcement, and the FBI was tracking people and all.
Does anyone know what fluid anonymity is? Any ideas on that? Or they also called it gray bloc? I don't know what that is. If anyone has any ideas, let me know.
All of that kind of stuff that's happening with Antifa right now. And, you know, post 2020, I feel like a lot of people like were, you know, a lot of people blocked up for actions, and kind of like, I don't know, it's just very easy. It's not easy, but it's like law enforcement can track the people's block like fairly regularly, and you know, and
It's
so
not
it's very
funny,
difficult
Dragon
to
Water.
kind of like, you know, wear black bloc and stay safe in the street, like in terms of like you're, you know, staying anonymous.
Oh.
So I don't know, I just think that like we just need a more like like
Thank you, Philip.
robust
Appreciate it.
discussion on
And
like
Lizard too.
how we're maintaining that anonymity, and how we're blocking up, and how we're kind of like appearing and disappearing for these kind of like actions. And
That's okay,
you know,
Dragon Water, no worries.
I think that like I just think that there's like some things that we could move forward in that regard. So as far as like bashback actions go, I don't really feel like there was like a lot of development in terms of like black bloc or like street kind of like anonymity or things like that. But yeah, so hopefully we can move the discussion now, but always be safe on the street. Like, I'm not saying like don't go unblocked ever, And there's all these, you know, safety tactics. So just my 2 cents.
I do feel like we could definitely have a lot, or like, as people who are excited to see things in the street get weirder, there's a lot we can do
Thank you,
better at in
Dragon
terms
Water.
of like
I
developing
appreciate it.
anonymity. But then as I kind of want to go back to the question in terms of like, is it useful to have a bashback block, not necessarily as a block of people who all dress the same, but maybe as like a block of people with similar intentions, or like a way to kind of like make an intention have like a specific geographic place. And I think that that still feels very useful, and that oftentimes people will come to demonstrations and feel very alone and like have a specific kind of intention, or like a person that they would, a kind of person that they'd rather be around, and whether that person is dressed alike or not with them is maybe like, to me, feels less relevant than maybe like there are other ways to call for a block, being like, we want like a queer anti-capitalist block at this like May 1st demonstration, or like this anti-fascist demonstration is calling for like a militant trans feminine block, or like something like that. And that can look as simple as being like, this block of people, like maybe like 4 people are gonna like
A militant trans
dedicate to,
feminism
like, bringing,
block.
like a banner that says like,
I want to
"Queers
see what a
Back," or,
militant
like,
trans
having, like,
feminism
pink
block
and,
looks like.
black flags, just so that they can be found by other people who would like maybe be interested in like walking with them, whether it's to like get into a fight or just be around other queers or whatever. But like calling for a block in the sense of like people walking in a block, or like being together in a block, still feels very useful, although definitely we should always be stepping our game up in terms of security.
I think I'll build off of that too, of like,
Oh, yeah.
what,
Hang on. Yeah. LV is absolutely Antifa. One has called themselves Antifa multiple times. I would bet every single person we are watching right now is in Antifa. But LV is the most like hardest of the hardcore Antifa. For certain. It'd be interesting to see what else this person has online, wouldn't it?
like already just like these, by having them exist in the first place, whether they get called or not, what it is like creating like safe queer spaces for organizing anti-fascist tactics and building affinity and community. But like having them in places and present, it does flag for folks that it exists in our area, and when folks go out together, how they could possibly find or know that it, know that it just exists. I think like showing up presently in those ways, make sure that like queer and trans militancy is like a part of the discussion and a part of actions like towards liberation. But like but to like segue into this like idea of gray block and into these ideas of like more
Explain what it is to us, please.
subtle anonymity.
Subtle anonymity.
Like we just actually use that tactic here in California. We every year have a straight pride held in Modesto, and over the last 4 years have tried to build up a community response to successfully shut that platform down. This year was one of the best years that we've ever done it. And we did that by calling for a 9 a.m. gray block that was well coordinated, well organized, and
what is the
many
general
affinity groups up and down were
James?
talking to be
Just
able
a
to pull
general
out those
overview.
numbers and coordinate showing up on time together. But next thing you know, there's like over 100 gray block radical trans queer anti-fascists hanging out ready to like shut down a straight pride event. That was then, and then we had even like an 11 a.m. regular community call too, where just like regular community members got a flyer at 11 a.m. to come and show up to this event and like really hold it down with us. And so, and then to mention like the gray block that like Riders of Riot and the Lavender Angels in Sacramento go out and do when they're doing their queer self-defense formation. That definitely allow for folks to like be able to point them out, tell that they're them, and be able to like check in and count on them. But it just really depends, I think, on like what the block is for, and like and what exactly the organized action is, right? Is it like patrolling your queer district? Is it shutting down straight pride? Is it showing up in the name of Black lives? Like what what is it? And that can kind of help. But I always think I love to see it. I love it every time.
There are a couple of questions about disability inclusion. Morgan talked about the intense isolation of men.
Hang on, we have another super chat. Emphasize, big spender tonight, emphasize. Being the press at actions they call for, plausible deniability, just one form of fluid anonymity to have front row seats at the destruction. Oh, so like when they're posing as press. All right, that makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. Did the caption say That's funny. That is funny.
Many queer disabled people around the world since the pandemic. And Tovia asked about how queer and trans self-defense can be more accessible to disabled and poor people. So I think from everyone, sort of what you see as strategies around disability inclusion and what that looks like and what that can mean.
I mean, as far as disability and kind of accessibility issues go, I just feel like I go back to the concept of like a military formation and the social aspect of it, and the understanding that there are so many different roles within actions that everybody can take part in and creatively engage in, and like, and also like in terms of like determining targets, and in terms of like the kind of like social media constellations that these actions happen in, that, you know, all of these things are like a part of like a, you know, kind of a campaign, like a military campaign or something like that. And so I just think that we're like our imagination is sort of like we're kind of like we keep hitting a brick wall in terms of like you know, just kind of like confronting these instances on the street when we see them, and not sort of.
Hang on, super chat from Tom J. Thank you, Tom J. Found it interesting speaking to a conservative retired New York PD about this. He said the communist activists are a distraction. We've been fighting them for decades and always win. Real threats are globalists, WEF, and such. I disagree. I really disagree. Because the problem is that it's not just like, listen, their protests or things like that. I don't think their protests actually do anything. However, the people that those protests are riling up, they work in schools. This is how they took over the schools. The WEF is not taking over the schools. Average people are. And then they're teaching these batshit insane ideas in the classroom to kids as young as 4 years old. So, do I think the protests and things are a distraction? Sure. But that's not the point. There's a bigger picture. But thank you, Tom. And by the way, I do also think the WEF is a problem. There are multiple problems that we have to deal with. There are multiple different levels to this problem. And to say it's like all of one thing or all of another thing is just not true. To ignore these people is to basically defeat yourself, to be quite honest. Because again, these people are dictating the talking points of the Democratic Party. A couple years from now, the Democratic Party will be saying exactly the same thing that they are. We know that because we can look back and see what these guys were presenting 5 years ago and watch a Democratic Party speech today of any sort, really, and they're the same. So I don't think we can dismiss these people. And I also, quite frankly, don't think police officers are usually the brightest crayons in the box, if I'm honest about it. Great chat from Douglas. The key to understanding commie philosophy and ideology is that they believe logic comes from the dialectic, which contrasts with the traditional Western tradition view that logic comes from forms. I think that is a really, really good observation, Douglas. And One of the reasons I like watching these presentations and I like watching Socialism Saturday is that we learn their language. Because this is one of the easier to understand socialism videos, but they do speak a different language, and we need to be able to learn their language so that we can understand when we're hearing their language out in the real world.
Of like the broader like ways that we can be like training and preparing ourselves in like a broader sense, like in terms of thinking of like, you know, like how what do we want to create, how do like trainings work, how do these like all of these different things involve, like they don't involve just like, you know, just two people like fighting or like a group of people fighting. They involve so many different kind of like people and components to it. And yeah, I mean, even just like I was feeling like in 2020, like so many different actions would happen, and it's sort of like you know, the affinity groups that I saw forming would tend to.
I think you guys sound really conspiratorial when you say everything that's happening in our society is coming from one place and being funded by one place. No, it's not. I'm sorry, that's just not true. That is not possible. It is not possible. Just from a scale perspective, it is not possible that every single group like this in the world is being funded from a single source. There are too many of them. I'm not suggesting the WEF doesn't have anything to do with it, but anyone who thinks that the WEF is funding and supporting every single one of these groups, I don't think you've worked with something at any sort of scale to know what's required for that to happen. It's just not it is not a possible thing to scale up to something like that. It's just not. Let me see.
To focus around you know, kind of like being.
It is, I would say that it is absolutely impossible for you to give me receipts to show the WEF is funding every single group like this in the world. You do not have that. I know you don't have it, and you know you don't have it. So let's stop pretending, shall we? That is not possible. It is not possible. Don't bullshit a bullshitter.
The like the most like vulgar form of like frontliners, so like holding a line of shields for like against cops or fascists or whatever. But a lot of times like those actions would forget all of the different components of making a successful march or action happen, such as like scouts, such as like evacuating people, such as medics, such as like even social media communication, like all of these different like components of it kind of like tend to fall by the wayside because we prioritize the like just this sort of like, you know, the one very visible clash. And I think we just need to like change our imagination.
All right, Jason, we're going to drop this topic after this. You do not have receipts for what you say you do. I know you don't have receipts for what you say you do. And you asserting that you have receipts for what you are claiming you have receipts for makes me question basically anything else that you have to say. We are not going to deal in unhinged conspiracy theories on Socialism Saturday. I don't think it's productive. So no, I don't believe you have receipts for this. And no, I will not engage in a discussion on this because it is literally impossible for you to have what you are claiming to have.
Morgan, I really thank you for your question. And I think I'm going to speak on a a conversation
I believe you
actually
might
just
have
had
those receipts more
with
than I believe
somebody
Jason has his
who, so I'm a
receipts.
part of an abolitionist organization, very, very public, forward facing in the area, who reached out and had said that they were worried
It's
about
probably true,
showing up
William.
to our events because of COVID, because wondering about our pandemic safety precautions. Is what they were asking about, and through this conversation they got to kind of really inform me about how isolated they felt and how neglected they felt by folks acting like the pandemic was over. And so what we were able to do through that was that
Let's just keep in mind, this was streamed on November 2nd, 2022. This was streamed 10 days ago. And these people are like, the pandemic's still not over. They're hanging on to it so vigorously.
like promise that our events, indoor, outdoor, all of that, we're going to, of course, continue to make sure that we were following COVID safety precautions. But I think as a movement, it is actually on us as to realize that we are creating a space that is not safe for our for other able-bodied types and other folks in our community, who don't feel safe, who don't even feel like they could walk up to us and tell us this because we're walking around with our masks off. And I know that there's many leftists in my area. You know, there's many community events right now in my community that are actively not encouraging masks, and therefore not creating a culture where we're doing that.
Oh.
And so it is kind of like the work that we're doing here.
Well, guys, there's some good news out of Arizona. It looks as though Carrie Lake has won, or at least is ahead now. That's nice. I'm glad to see Carrie Lake win. I'm really glad. I like Carrie Lake a lot, and I'm glad the last vote drop I guess just dropped, and it looks like that she is squarely in the lead. Let me just look this up real quick. Carrie Lake, Katie Hobbs. Let's see what it says on the Google. That'll be exciting if that finally ends and Carrie Lake wins. Finally, some good news. I'm not upset that Blake Masters lost, I'll tell you that. No, the official vote count isn't in Google yet, but they're tweeting about it, so I have to assume they know something we don't. Incognito says, all right again, Miss K, on folks being spelled F-O-L-X. Thank you, Incognito. I appreciate that.
At the time I remember having the conversation. I was like, I don't know really what to do about everybody else. But the truth is being like a grassroots organizer in town, I've been doing it for so many years that I do know a lot of folks. And so actually it is on me to call my friends and be like, hey, can you make sure that there's masks at your events? You know, like, can we make sure?
It does say folks. It does say folks. Incognito was right. Hang on.
Be like, hey, can you make sure that there's masks at your event?
Folks. F-O-L-X. In the closed captions. These people are so... I'm surprised this person is not wearing a mask on this call.
You know, like, can we make sure that we're creating a space that includes our all of our brothers, sisters, and non-binary folks? Like, are we making sure that we're doing this? Because I don't even think that we know, right? It's like this privilege that we get. And like, you know, and had that person not come into my inbox and been like, hey, I want to be able to come to your events. You're one of the only dopest abolitionist orgs in town. And I don't know if I can because I don't know what your policies and stuff are on wearing masks at the events. It was without that conversation.
I'm totally committed to this advocacy work. I just can't come to a meeting if other people aren't wearing masks around me. I just can't come to a meeting. I am so passionate about this work that I need everyone around me to wear a mask for me to participate in it. Ooh. Sin is doing some spying. I love it.
I wouldn't have even been able to even see that they had been so isolated from this community for years. Like people, the world is acting like it's going back to normal, and we have to tell the world that it's not. We are living in an endemic, and so because of it, we have to create spaces that are still acting like COVID is a very real thing. And I thank you for your question. And I'm hoping the organizers across this country and the people that are watching are going to tell their friends, hey, the next event we throw, masks, yo. And I do encourage you, Morgan, to reach out to some organizations with that question, asking how can you participate in your area? Because that was how we were able to do it, and I know that puts a lot of the work on you, and that's not fair. But we start somewhere. And because that one person tapped us, we're able to like have the ripple effects are going beyond.
For me, I think, and like a more zoomed in kind of like smaller scale way, a lot of the inclusion and ability stuff came down to like small group conversations about what
I'm about
kinds
to
of
open a
risks
beer
people
called
felt
Psychedelic
okay
Love.
with, what kind of like, yeah, like which kind of, because the thing is like there's a jillion different roles. There's not like one right way to like do defense or offense or whatever. And like, yeah, kind of coming from like a smaller affinity group place, like having like a less macho attitude and like having less failures of imagination and like more space for like creativity in terms of like how to move forward is like, for me, has always felt like an easier way to like break out of like a certain kind of like really rigid, like frozen idea of like what a militant is. And yeah, like having dialogue around that, like in a small group, being like able to take into consideration as many needs as possible, and like how
This beer is delightful.
that feels like dignified or not for everyone, and how that feels like worthwhile in terms of
Okay,
like,
I just need to do a quick pause and talk about this beer that I just poured. This is delightful. This is called Psychedelic Love. It's got a cool can. It is from Branch Blade Brewing Company, and that is in Keene, New Hampshire. Shout out New Hampshire. And this is a sour ale with blackberry, pineapple, marshmallow, and vanilla. And I can definitely taste the marshmallow, and it's like it's got like the citrusy part of the pineapple is just like it's so slight. It's not overpoweringly sour, and it's got like this nice kind of like soft, creamy finish. Really good, Branch Blade Brewing. Really, really good. Cheers to you. If you guys are drinking anything good on this lovely Saturday evening, please let us know what you're drinking in the chat and mount that like button while you're there.
getting this or that kind of thing done has been like one way that I've seen that addressed around me.
Wait, I am not even showing you guys the video. God damn it. There we go.
There's another question that came in about socialist rifle clubs and John Brown gun clubs. So those have been getting a lot of news, and what you see is
socialist
the sort of
rifle
relationship
clubs
between the kind of different left gun club worlds and how they intersect or diverge in movements.
Absolutely, at least here. And then they're helping arm and train our queer and trans folks, as well as just members of this community. I think Sacramento's maybe.
I'm
we're
not
like
sure the vote
kind
count
of a
has been
small town with a
added to
big
the
city
tally yet.
vibe.
They just came out of
And so
Maricopa.
that's how we're able to like work kind of closely together. But I think that intentional outreach and working with
Absolutely.
those folks is important, because not only is it like providing that community building and affinity building, but like I said, because of it, we were able to hook up our Socialist Rifleist Association, with our local queer and trans community to help them get their CCWs, to help train them on how to use their weapons, to also.
All right, I want everyone to really hear this right now. Antifa is working with the John Brown Gun Club to train Antifa. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, I'm not opposed to more people learning how to use guns, believe me, but like that, well, seems like it could be rather problematic.
take them up and they go up shooting once a month, and to train them how to do that. So it's been pretty effective.
Any thoughts about the presence of firearms by leftists at protests over the last year? What's your assessment of its effectiveness, its impact, its the pros and cons of it?
I
mean,
can't
all
speak.
I say. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, my bad. You should go ahead.
Okay, everyone went quiet. How about Sheila T? How about you go first?
Sure. Sorry. In Philly, there hasn't been any sort of like big visible presence of firearms at demonstrations, and I don't think that that means that there aren't any there. I think it means that oftentimes if like anarchists, anti-fascists, or leftists are carrying firearms, they're not making any kind of like noise about it, and they're not like trying to like show them or like use them as like, I mean, like they are a deterrent, but I don't think that they're a deterrent in terms of like their visibility and how people use them here. And that's been interesting to not see, I guess. And the same has been the case during a lot of like the 2020 rioting. I think like a lot of people were carrying maybe more than showed up, and like it just never, the firearm just never came out. Like it, and I think maybe that also has to do with like how clashes get policed here, and like that, I don't know, that there's just maybe also just like already a lot of guns in Philadelphia in general. But I think it's like hard to weigh in on like whether that's effective or not or what. I think maybe like in terms of the individuals carrying and like the people around them that know that, if there's like something empowering or useful or relevant.
I'm knitting some
in terms
trim
of,
for
like,
my shawl
materially
today.
how
It's going to
played
turn
out
into a
between different,
border.
like teams clashing, it's like super invisible, and I don't even know if people are assuming it
A
one way or the
swervy
other,
border.
or like how much that plays out in terms of people's assumptions about clashes as they take place.
Abby, do you want to go?
Hang on. Red Room Diecast is asking another great question. Red Room Diecast, I hope you come to more of our Socialism Saturdays. Do these communists have an end goal to turn into a fascist state in favor, or am I getting it? They want communism. Anytime you hear the word abolition or liberation, what they mean is the overthrow of capitalism and the installation of a communist state in which you will own nothing and you will be happy. They want communism. They want to overthrow capitalism. They want to get rid of all private property. They want to abolish the family. If you have not recently read the Communist Manifesto, we read this for book club in my community like a couple weeks ago. This is a really short read. Everyone needs to get a PDF of the Communist Manifesto, or you can get a print book as well. I personally prefer a print book. You need to read the Communist Manifesto. Everything that these people are doing comes from the Communist Manifesto. It's free on the internet. It'll take you maybe an hour or two to kind of work your way through it if you're allowing yourself time to process. It's really short, but it's very important, and it tells you where they're going. They want to get rid of capitalism. They want to get rid of all private business. They want to get rid of all private property. They want to abolish the family structure because they want everyone beholden to the state. That's what they're working towards.
Yeah, I feel like that's a similar story in Los Angeles too. I just I guess I would just say, like, I think that Yeah, I just think that like
No. Hang on.
the
No. These people are not working towards any sort of public-private partnership. These people want to abolish all private property. This is why, Jason, we don't believe that everything comes from the WEF. This is why we don't advance conspiracy theories that says everything comes from the WEF. It does not. What these people want comes from the Communist Manifesto.
escalation should be on par with what's happening. And I think that, you know, I don't think that we're at a point with like gun battles or anything like that. And so I think that it's good to train for whatever and everything. But I think like, you know, I don't know. I personally kind of like look back at the Weather Underground and feel like it was
Oh,
sort of
God.
in like like biting off more than they could chew and an over escalation given the context.
The Weather
And I kind of feel like I don't really think that people
The Weather Underground just, you know, they bit off more than they can chew. The fucking Weather Underground. Weren't the Weather Underground like bombing a lot of like places? Isn't that what the Weather Underground was? They were like legitimate terrorists. I love this. They're like, they just bit off more than they could chew. Listen, if we don't laugh, we'll cry, okay? We have to laugh, otherwise we will cry.
are doing that. I feel like people are generally like within the realm of like what's happening and like the messaging and like kind of like what's going on. So I kind of feel like, you know, I don't know how long, like how long does it take to train somebody on how to use a firearm? Like, I mean, a military boot camp is like what, like 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something, like just kind of like a rudimentary one. So I'm kind of like, if things push come to shove, I feel like people could get trained up really fast. That's just my personal opinion, but I'm glad that people are learning.
I too am glad that people are learning, because I think specifically where we saw most of the guns were on the far right. Like that was where most of the guns lived during 2020. In our area, we had far right extremists who were able to walk around with their CCWs, their concealed weapons permits, and have
I
their
don't
guns
need
in
a
their
concealed
holster.
weapons permit in New Hampshire.
Uh,
I can
being
open
able to
carry
walk right by
wherever I
law
want,
enforcement
basically.
while giving each other hugs and high fives. You know, and the truth is that but this is where we're at, right? Like they're bringing guns, so then therefore we feel like and these are all antagonisms and all dialectical and all how it goes, but eventually it does, though. It does get to that gun battle. We have already lost lives in 2020 due to far right guns. And then, you know, and then any self-defense tactics, then they were
I want you guys to hear that they are planning for the guns to be used in battle against the far right. That's literally what they're saying right now. These people are literally planning to use guns in battle against the far right fascists.
taken out by the state.
Thank
You
you,
know, we
Sin. I'll
saw what
check it
happened to
out.
the individual up in Washington. And um, and so do we see a role with guns?
Good
And
find,
where are they
Sin.
at? I mean, they're out there. We have to decide how we want to engage in that. And we have to decide, and that's really where it is right? Like when we talk about defending our joy and organizing our rage, us as communities have to have those conversations with.
Defending our joy in organizing our rage. Look at what it's there on the screen. They just said defending our joy and organizing our rage. And they're talking about guns being used against far right fascists.
ourselves, being like, we know that this is coming. We know that this exists. How do we want to do this? How do we want to engage in this? And best prepare in the way that we can. But the truth is we're training folks up because that's what we're up against.
We're training folks up because that's what we're up against. Max looks a little unhinged, if I'm honest about it. Emphasize says, open carry in Alabama too, and in Florida, if you know how, I'm always going fishing. Well, I don't need to be going fishing in New Hampshire. I have to get a gun I can open carry. I know which one I want. Victor keeps promising he's going to take me to buy a gun that I can open carry. And the reason I want to open carry in New Hampshire is because it makes progressives nervous. And I like making progressives nervous because then they're more inclined to leave. I need to get my gun. It's been long enough. I've been threatening to get my gun for a while. No, I'm going to get a Sig Sauer. I'm going to get one with a gold trigger.
Up against death, whether that's state violence, far-right extremist violence, or climate catastrophe, which, it all leads to our death. And we absolutely have to be willing to defend ourselves. But again, it gets there. We have to name that. We have to be willing to name that as a movement. We have to say that out loud. It's going to get to gun battles. And do we want to get to gun battles? I don't think we do. That's not really that's not really our goal when we say housing is a human right, food for all, education for everybody. We're not trying to do that at gunpoint, And so, yeah, that's just all I have to say is we have to name it. We have to name it.
So we went to V for Vendetta. The LPNH had a V for Vendetta night at a local movie theater last week, which is why I didn't do Socialism Saturday last week. And so we went to see the movie and hang out with the libertarians. And there was one guy there, shout out Ron, and Ron had a fucking gun that was this big, and it was folded into a little square that was less. Ooh, I don't want you guys to see what's on my. Actually, I don't have anything incriminating on my phone, but there was a gun that was smaller than my phone, and it folded into a little triangle. And it was you could literally put this gun folded up in your back pocket. And if you needed it, you take it out and you it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was a working gun. It just folded into a little block that is smaller than my phone. That was a little rectangle. I was like, that is the best. What a great idea.
It's a matter of time. It's not even decades off. It's years off. And we're here now. So
I just wanted to add something quick on Texas. Speaking of where the guns are, and also a state where you barely need anything to carry a gun, I think at this point, with constitutional carry. And I've certainly, of all of the sort of events over the summer and into the fall that I've been following, it seems like the Elm Fork John Brown Club is super present at many of these counter protests or demos to sort of physically block the far right groups from either messing with people in the community, whether that's
Let's see. Thank you, Cliff Lee, for the super chat. They do want their ideas enforced at gunpoint. Yes, they do. They absolutely do. That is very true. Not just their gunpoint. They want the right. They want the right to enforce their rules on the right. They want the right to enforce their rules on the right wing. Why do you think they keep calling cops at defund police rallies? Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. But I will say this. I know many of you conservatives, and I'm not suggesting everyone here is a conservative because I know you're not all conservatives, but I don't trust the cops. I know conservatives tend to like the cops, but I don't trust them, and I don't think you should trust them either. And I don't think the police are going to be there to save you when you actually need them. I'm just saying, you need to save yourself. Don't expect anyone to come help you. I was in DC after the 2020 election when they were doing the Million MAGA marches there, and I saw the DC police make Trump supporters go through Black Lives Matter Plaza to get the shit kicked out of them, and the police did nothing. So let's just keep that in mind, that I may not be in favor of these people. I am also not opposed to defunding the police.
escorting people to their car or standing in front of a venue to, kind of be a physical block, whether or not they're even caring, like they're like very much there like as a group. And so I'm wondering, Elvie, if that's sort of connected to some of the things you were talking about in terms of like group cohesion. Like, is there a role to play for these groups in sort of having those like cohesive groups who are kind of like ready to roll? And in the case of Texas, there are definitely guns present on the side of the far right openly. So it might be a different dynamic. And certainly like it hasn't come to the point yet where people are actually like engaged in gun battles, but I think it's sort of, it's not expected. Like, I think like I've seen some very strange responses from the far right to like the Elm Fork John Brown Club in particular, and just sort of like weird macho posturing about guns sort of in response to like, oh, Antifa, they can't be macho enough to carry guns. It seems like on a certain level it messes with them. But on another level, like people in community are seeing that like there is somebody here who is like armed, who will walk them to their car or prevent somebody from entering a venue who might harm them.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Elvie?
I just still think that like numbers are our biggest strength. And I just feel like when I think about conflict mediation, and I'm not talking about de-escalating or street conflicts or anything like that, I'm like just talking about conflict mediation among our comrades.
Comrades!
I feel like the more
Thought
that
you
I
thought they wouldn't
work
get
on
there.
that, the more that I realize how much like effort and skills and just kind of like training goes into just getting along with our comrades. And so it's like you have like you'll have a conflict between two different comrades, but it really is a conflict between like their friends and like other friends, and like it's a whole constellation of that. So even just like checking in with everybody about what's going on with that conflict is like hours and hours of emotional labor, not to mention like thinking through like responses.
Not yet.
To
I need to write a bingo card. You're right,
to,
Trendolin. I do need to do that.
How to help somebody through all of the different kind of like therapeutic or just like logistical forces that put somebody in a place where they can't resolve a conflict with their comrade, or like, and I'm not even talking about like interpersonal violence, like sexual assault and things like that, which is like even more complicated and takes even more resources. And so like when I spend time in the communities I spend time in, it's sort of like radical communities, it's like we don't have any resources around that. Like it's very like taxing. These things are taxing. So when I think about like
big
training
time.
around
big time
guns or something, I feel like it's totally
part of why we're
great and we should all do that. However,
so for those of you who are new to Socialism Saturday, one of the reasons that I started this is because I am absolutely unequivocally convinced that these people have told us exactly what they are doing on the internet, what they're doing in terms of activism, what they're doing in terms of the schools, what they're doing in terms of elections. I think that these people act with such hubris that they say everything they're doing on the internet. The problem is that there is so much content on the internet that where they say they're doing it gets completely buried. And we end up watching videos that have like maybe a couple hundred views where they spill the beans about everything. I am absolutely convinced that someday someone is going to find a random video on YouTube somewhere where we find out exactly and precisely what they did in the 2020 election, which of course was the most perfect and beautiful election in the history of elections. But I'm absolutely convinced that we are going to find someday a not really highly viewed video on YouTube where they say exactly and precisely how they made the 2020 election the most perfect election in the history of elections. And it will be right out in the open, and no one will have watched it because it's on some communist YouTube channel. I'm convinced of this. And so part of the reason that we do Socialism Saturday and that I do streams like this rather often is because these people have such hubris that they tell us everything that they're doing and how they do it. And they do it out in the open. And we just need to make sure we're paying attention to it. I could be wrong, but I think we're going to find it someday. I really do.
However, there's like, we have a gaping wound in, like, we have just this gaping wound in our communities that we have not like resolved. We don't have the resources around, we have not organized the resources around solving those kind of things. And I feel like, to me, that's like every project that we start, like, it gets destroyed by interpersonal conflict. And it's just time and time again. And it's like, when are we going to learn the lesson that it's sort of like, when, you know, for example, we've gotten really good on, you know, in the revolutionary left around like feeding mass groups of people, 500 people or whatever. And it's like, we know that all of the logistics that it takes to like get the food, cook the food, like have the recipes, serve the food, like all of these different aspects. And yet when it comes to interpersonal conflict, we don't approach it with that kind of rigor. And that's where I kind of feel like, you know, our real effort should, that's where I'm talking about like the kind of like socializing of like a military response. Sort of like those are that's the kind of like social dimension that I think that we like, that is really important to take seriously when we're talking about like queer like violence, queer self-defense, and like all.
Hang on. I swear to God, Red Room, you are like my new favorite person. Is that an issue then? The mainstream public is not paying attention and dismissing them? Bro, wait until you get into my Schools Exposed series. For those of you who are new, do you guys remember the Burlington School District that was exposed several months ago? They were grooming children live on the internet. And we're talking about, they were putting kids on the internet that were 12 years old, talking about how they were groomed in elementary school by their guidance counselor. And this was a webinar put on by the school district. I was the one that found that webinar. My community were the ones that researched the Burlington school districts all weekend long. And we were the ones that exposed that. And it was all on the internet. It was public on the internet. It was just waiting for someone to watch it. So yeah, that's exactly right. The mainstream public is not paying attention to what is being said loud and clear on the internet every single day. That's why I'm doing my Schools Exposed program, where I'm training people how to use publicly available information on the internet to find out what the schools are teaching their kids, because it is literally all out there. It is on all their websites. It is on their YouTube channels. It is on their social media. They don't hide it at all. And it's just a matter of looking for it and knowing how to look for it and knowing where to look for it. And so, yeah, a lot of this stuff is all out there, but people don't care enough to look. And that's part of the problem. It's why they get away with it.
All of those things.
Over the last 10 minutes that we have, I want to focus us in on what we see as the potential for new formations and strategies. People have spoken to this in various ways. LV, you talked about
Sure, Jason, go ahead.
being an aborted attempt and our project, and some of the conflict mediation stuff you're thinking about. Max, you referred a little bit, gestured to a future horizon and the kinds of formations that might be appropriate. I know you have a little bit to say about this, Melissa. So let's close out in doing a go around and us all speaking to this.
Guys, as they're closing out and doing their last 10 minutes, what I'd like to ask everyone to do in the chat is maybe put in some takeaways that you took from this presentation. This is a new thing we're going to try. We're going to do crowdsourced learning. What are some of your takeaways that you learned from watching Socialism tonight? And what do you think we should kind of like bring forward and just keep in mind as we're engaging with these types of people? And if you're just here to drink, that's fine too.
I don't have a ton to say because I feel like everyone's covered a lot of what it takes to build these formations. And I like, that was exactly kind of what I wanted to hear, Al, like the sense that like before you're like taking up arms, like what are you doing actually to like strengthen the group? What are you doing to sort of build those resources that people have? Like it doesn't make any sense to go to that level of escalation if the group actually isn't connected and isn't caring for one another in a way and doesn't have those resources. I've been going back and forth, like in what I'm seeing, like part of me feels like we're in a moment where it's like all hands on deck, lots of strategies are in play, lots of different people are like tangling with this question right now, like how do you respond when the far right shows up? And there's so much, institutional knowledge among anti-fascists on how to do that. What I've been seeing over the last couple of months, like for example, in Idaho, this was where the Patriot Front showed up in a U-Haul and were arrested, 31 of them.
Patriot Front is a bunch of feds. Patriot Front is feds. They're feds. They're not real. There are absolutely groups that believe those types of toxic ideas, but let's be very clear. Patriot Front is the FBI.
Before the Pride event, but it ended up almost, for the people there, like they had a whole other plan that was actually what they were focused on that day in terms of creating a safe space for folks having big banners to block
Excellent.
People who were trying to like record people and things like that. But it was an interesting moment to watch sort of like, the 501c3 universe of queer and trans life negotiate how do you work with anti-fascist activists and like
Kelly,
what are we comfortable with, groups who are mostly just going to call cops to report things, realizing that that is not a safe strategy. And I think particularly after 2020 has attuned people to looking for safety outside of policing. So I'm it's hard to say I'm optimistic about anything, but like I'm seeing those as like very productive tensions of people sort of like working out like what tools do we have to respond that aren't law enforcement, what capacities do we have for people who maybe aren't politically aligned with us but like are the ones who are showing up and getting it done. Like you were saying in the beginning, the kind of like liberals who are just like had never considered anything like direct action or self-defense, seeing like what the need is in their community and seeing who's showing up. And if that's like folks at the farmers market, which I love as an entry point, or people just like all of a sudden following a zillion anti-fascist researchers on Twitter, which other folks are doing, like I think this is a potentially community building moment on that side.
I think for me, what feels most exciting about new formations isn't like any specific kind of like model or like style of organizing. I think like that people are getting excited to try to get things done at all is more exciting to me. Like I don't care if someone starts a gang or an affinity group or like a syndicate or whatever. Like so all these like specific formation styles are so contextual, and I don't think that there's like a right one for any one context necessarily, but like thinking through that, like people are thinking through that they want to do a specific thing, they want to get together with other people to get it done, and like how can they do that feels maybe like the most exciting to me, or like the one that I feel like is going to be as flexible as it needs to be anyway, and like that I look forward to the most.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like feel like I sort of outlined some of the things that I feel about like what would be great to see in the next year or few years. I think also in addition to kind of like this social sort of like understanding of like the component of violence, I also just think like loudly proclaiming that like violence is a part of our revolutionary like imagination, and like yes, self-defense, but also like violence does happen. It is part of like consequences to navigating conflict, and I think that like not shying away from that is important. And I also think that really like especially for folks that are kind of like seeking out a conversation along this are probably folks that are more drawn to building that kind of like social capacity. So I would just encourage all of us to like seek out those folks that have already kind of like committed these acts of like self-defense, queer violence, like other things like that, and are getting caught up in different kind of like charges or being doxxed by fascists or other things like
Well, they
that,
think
and
everything is
really think
okay when
about
they
how
do
we
it.
can very, very materially support them in different
Yes.
capacities. Because I also think like
These
that
are
was one of the
students of
things that
Alinsky,
Bashback
for
was
sure.
really
For
important
sure.
for was when people take those actions, we're there to have their back, and you know, unconditionally almost. And so, you know, there was a number of targets that I remember having conversations with people about in the late 2000s, where people were like, oh, that wasn't the target I would have chosen. I don't think that we should support X, Y, or Z. But like, really, like, I just think that, you know, we need to be there for each other. And like, people get caught up, and the fascists are going to find the most vulnerable among us and take them down, and use them as examples for the rest of us. And we need to push back against that at every opportunity.
Max, do you want to close us out and saying what we should do for the future?
Yeah, I mean, and I think y'all kind of, everybody kind of touched on it, and that's, but the truth is I'm like most excited because that's what we are in, y'all. We are in this like programmatic, pragmatic stage of like, what do we do, as like as a people, not even just like as a movement, but like as a people, right? As like, as again, we try to talk about understanding the devastation around us, and we are trying to come up with figuring that out. Um, I think, like LV, you tapped it right on the head. The most important thing that we need to begin to do is address the gaping wound. I mean, like what we've seen over and over again. And I think what didn't the FBI do a whole report on the Twitter war and the shit talking that people were doing in Seattle? Like they were like just watching our Twitter beefs online, and stuff like that, about like, what do we do?
They were in the Chaz.
In the inevitability of conflict. You know what I mean? It is not something that we could ever avoid. Like literally, that's where evolution comes from. You need conflict on even down to a cellular level in order for change to occur. And how we actually embrace that stuff,
Good
instead
tip,
of
Douglas.
it being something that like devastates, is something that we absolutely have to get better at. When we talk about another world as possible, when we talk about what a vision looks like and what the world can be, it looks like us being able to like actively speaking my boundaries, and affirmatively speaking my boundaries, and people actively listening to them, and back and forth. But until we can begin to like mediate the harm that we're causing as we're unlearning all this toxic shit, and we're enacting all of these toxic things on each other as we're trying to build towards liberation, then all we're going to do is have to start over again every single time. And it's going to weaken our movement every single time. And something else I just want to pop into these questions that I saw real quick. And somebody spoke about like what else we'll do around the existing culture and structures because of concerns of anonymity. Somebody was like, hey, sometimes it prevents folks from getting involved. Something that I would love for us to do in the future is to make ourselves more accessible to our community, make our thought processes more accessible to our community. And then for us to name out loud that it takes time to trust build, it takes time to relationship build, it takes time to community build. And so your automatic want to hop into an organization where they're like, oh, we don't know you, has to be taken kindly. But also this organization needs to be like, how are we making this successful? How are we making a space to trust build with this person, with this community, and vice versa? Which then will lead us to having conversations about how do we address the gaping wound that is that we don't know how to navigate conflict in our movement, you know? And so those are really the two things that I really absolutely feel are the biggest and are in the directions we're going. Even the fact that every single panelist on this call today talked about it means that y'all who are watching this today are probably thinking about it. And therefore, there are many, many, many people in this movement having this conversation amongst themselves. You can give thanks for that. I give thanks for that we are trying to figure it out. But like, I think that that's where our focus should be. Gaping holes and addressing our and how we allow for community members who are brand new to this to come in and learn, and not allow for our fear of being like sacrificed to the cops, you know, keep us from teaching people what the fuck security culture is.
Beautifully said. Well, just a magnificent discussion tonight. You are such brilliant people, and I hope I get to count you all as comrades in the years ahead. So well done. Thank you, everybody. And let's close it out. Are we done with recording, Sean?
I guess that is it for tonight, guys. Well, I think one of the big takeaways that I want everyone to get from this is that they're arming themselves. That's not a joke. They're arming themselves. They're training. They're working with gun clubs. They're talking about how they need to use violence against the evil fascists, which they describe as people who are protesting drag shows and stuff like that. This is serious. And again, I really think that you ignore these people at your own peril. They are serious. They are unhinged. They're dangerous. And they're winning. So ignore them at your own peril. I hope everyone has had a very sobering night. Listen to them talking about how they're going to protect themselves from fascist violence. Yes, and Reagan, this is another great point. They are highly organized. They are way more organized than us. And they've been kicking our asses for a really long time. You know? If I take you out behind the shed, it's because I'm telling you something that you need to hear. Listen, I don't, if I'm telling you something, it's because it's important. It's not because I'm trying to embarrass you. It's not because I'm trying to make you feel bad. It's because we need to start listening and we need to start taking this way more seriously than we are. And so if I'm taking the time to tell you guys something, I'm doing it with love. I really am. But I'm going to give you the tough love that your mother damn well should have given you. And you can choose to listen to it or not at the end of the day. All right, guys, that is all we have for tonight. Now, as a reminder, we are doing movie night in my supporter Discord tomorrow. Happy birthday to John Morgan. We are watching Caroline. He is hosting our movie night for us. I've never seen it, but John Morgan loves it. And so we're going to have movie night. We're going to watch a fun flick. We're going to have nice conversation in a private environment where we can chill out and be among sane people, not communists. If you would like to get access to my supporter Discord, there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can head over to activelyunwoke.com/support and you can join my Patreon for $5 a month, all the way up to $250 a month, depending on how much money you want to give me and what types of perks you want. You can also join my locals, and might I recommend you join my locals because I'm pretty sure I have the best community on locals. I have I have one of the most active communities on locals. I have and I think one of the most sane communities on locals as well. We do 2 Zoom calls every single week on Monday and Wednesday. We just did Bitchcraft earlier today. We do have a book club that we're doing. We do movie night in my supporter Discord, and all of that will be available to you if you join my locals or my Patreon and come and join us for some private community events. All right, guys, that is all I have for right now. I'm going to go hang out with my husband and finish the rest of my beer. Cheers, everyone. Happy Socialism Saturday. We will see you here next week. Same time, same place. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.